Good afternoon, everyone. I was just waiting for my cue. We're good to go. I'd like to start by just reminding everyone that Chair Robinson is absent. She sends her regrets, and I'm happy to fulfill her role for her. So before we begin, we've got quorum, so we're not going to go through that point. I'm going to turn it over to Chris Ann, who will read the land acknowledgement. Chris Ann?
Thank you, Vice Chair. We acknowledge the land we are standing on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit.
Thank you. And before we start our regular meeting, we've got, I suppose, a rather sad duty to do today, but we're going to make it happy, right, Rick? So I'm going to turn it over to Rick to say a few words, and I'd like to welcome as well our mayor, who's joined us for this special little event. Rick, over to you.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair De Laurentiis, and good morning, or good afternoon to everybody. Yes, we do have a special guest with us this afternoon to pay tribute to Commissioner Heisey, as this is his last board meeting. Commissioner Heisey was, just a little background, Commissioner Heisey was first appointed to the TTC board on November 1st, 2012, and he was actually the vice chair of this board from May of 2015 to May of 2020. And as many of you know, Commissioner Heisey has lived in Toronto his entire life. He has graduated from Osgoode Hall Law School and is very passionate about public transit. I can tell you that Commissioner Heisey has contributed considerable time during his career to public service as a board member here at the TTC, as well as Toronto Parking Authority and Toronto Police Services. In September of 2019, this board, commissioners reminded that they congratulated Vice Chair Heisey at the time, who had the honor of the dedication in his honor of the Sherbourne cycling track. It was just real nice. You know, as we all know, Commissioner Heisey is an avid cyclist who's played an important role in the conception of separated cycle tracks on Richmond, Adelaide, and Sherbourne streets. Commissioner, I would tell you, you will be greatly missed by this organization. On a personal note, I just want to thank you for your support, your guidance. It's been invaluable to me in my 6.5 years in working in this organization. So thank you for that, sir. And with that, what I would like to do is turn it over to the mayor, Mayor Tory. To you, sir.
You're on mute.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I'm not.
No, you're on. You're on now. Good.
So I said thank you to Rick, in case those didn't hear me, and thank you to Chair Joanne. And I should say, first of all, literally in all my time when I was sort of a person that was floating around City Hall circles when I wasn't at City Hall as mayor, and during my time as mayor, I've never been to a TTC meeting before, to my recollection. So now I have. And so I will start off, before I speak about Alan for a minute, just saying thank you. It's funny because probably the members of the TTC, including the civilian members, are people that I happen to have had intersections with in my life in various different places. And I just want to say, I say it all the time because I'm with Rick often, you know, how proud I am of how we do. I mean, I think we have lots of, you know, improvement to make, as you would in any area of business or government. But I just think the TTC does a great job. I have every confidence in Rick. And I know he's backed up by the board. And so I just want to say thank you for your service, because I know it's one of the boards that we have that is, you know, very demanding, both because of the, you know, the obvious public nature of the transit system and because of the sort of complexity of all the issues. Now, as for Alan, I don't know how long I've known Alan Heisey for, and he knows that I knew his late father, who was just one of those great characters that I met when I was a teenager, first involved in politics. And he really was one of the sort of the patron saints and a very revered figure, and some elements of Alan's father's curmudgeonly nature show through in Alan, but it's been tempered by obviously generations passing and so forth. But you know, the part that is remarkable to me, and it really is, I mean, Rick touched on it, but there are very few citizens, I'm not sure how many there would be, more than a handful, that have given in so many different areas in terms of engagement in the process of building the city. whether it was at the parking authority, the police board. I mean, at the police board, to be a member is a very taxing assignment. We just finished a police board meeting, or we're in the middle of one. The two parts are divided by this. And then to be the chair, which he was, at a somewhat tumultuous time. I'm not sure there are any that aren't tumultuous, but is really by itself a huge responsibility and a huge act of civic engagement. And then to follow that with the years of service on the TTC is really quite remarkable. And Alan, I just want to say that I as the mayor, and I'm sure I speak for previous mayors where you served, that is something that we're all very grateful for, because the degree to which these boards work is hugely contributed to by the presence of the civilian members. I really believe that. I mean, I think the councillors are important members, obviously, for obvious reasons, but I think the civilian members add an element to those boards that make it very special. And I don't think it's very many people on these boards that have things named after them, and I know that's not why you're in this business, but I think it's a tribute to your sort of determination and your stick with it kind of attitude that something you contributed to hugely was, and it's not directly in your sort of sphere as TTC or as police board member or as parking authority member, but it's just something you felt passionately about as well. And I include on that the island, cycling, et cetera. There's a long list. So really the purpose of my being here today was just to say thank you. For an incredible record of service. I was going to say that the only thing you have left to do is run for mayor, but you shouldn't get any ideas, and you couldn't afford to take the cut anyway. But having said that, you've been as engaged a citizen as we ever have, and I'm most appreciative, particularly of your service recently on the TTC. I don't want to take away from well, maybe I'll just wait, because I assume Alan might be saying a few words, and then I just want to say something about one item that's on your agenda today. So perhaps I'll leave that before I sign off and turn it back over to you, Madam Chair. And Alan, again, thank you for your service, and we'll look forward to seeing you in some other capacity, I'm sure, in the city's life as we go forward, even if it's just as an armchair critic.
Thank you, Mayor Tory. I think we all share those thoughts and those feelings about Alan. Alan, I think you need a rebuttal here, don't you?
Yeah.
Is this where we unmute and applaud, Madam Chair? I'm applauding.
Let's hear what Alan has to say first, and then we'll decide whether we'll give him our applause.
I'm very grateful and humbled by the recognition today. I would say that I was thinking today about what my earliest memories of the TTC were as a patron, and they were as a small boy traveling on the Leslie Street bus, changing buses at Eglinton because there were two fares, getting onto the bus again to pay the second fare, taking the Eglinton subway station down to Yonge Street, which was the most glamorous place imaginable when you're 12. And then the second memory that's vivid for me is I remember the first day, and it's why I've been very sympathetic to people who live in Scarborough. I remember how my world changed as a 14-year-old boy when the subway was extended to York Mills Station and I could finally get downtown fast. And I remember being in the front window like you see little kids on their first trip in the subway, and how exciting it all was. And to be involved in an organization as complex as this, with as many talented people as there are on it, and I include the counselors in that group. We've had an exceptional crop of counselors on this board on my 8 years here. They've been the creme de la creme, in my opinion. And I think people should be very comfortable with the quality of our governance and the effort that's put through to deliver a good transit system for our growing city. So I want everybody to know that this is a reluctant stepping down. I have to say, if it weren't for COVID-19 pandemic, I'd have continued for the balance of my term. It's just as many people right now are going through significant challenges. Some of those people are my clients, and I have to help them. So, and that includes family members. So I don't know what or where I will do anything else. I laughed when the mayor said I might run for mayor. My father did, in fact. It wasn't a spectacular campaign. I think he got 1,000 votes, but he had a lot of fun. And I want to thank everybody again for this time here. And I think we've made a difference, and I hope that everybody there continues to make the difference that we have made the last several years.
Thank you, Alan. And I'm pretty sure we have not seen the last of Alan's dedicating time to public service, because he's just that kind of guy. And I can tell you that, you know, I've certainly benefited greatly from his advice, and I'm going to miss the conversations and the advice that he's provided. I can also tell you that this was a wrenching decision for him, and he really has made it reluctantly, as he says. But Alan, I'm pretty sure we're going to see you back in public service. And we do have, you know, it's really too bad COVID has prevented us from giving you the hugs that we would have given you if you were in the room. We do have a little gift for you. It's going to be sent, right, Rick? Do you want to just hold it up? So it's the cutest box you've ever seen. And so it's sent with lots of love and lots of appreciation. So let's give Alan our really warm round of applause and hugs.
There you go, Alan.
Thank you. And Mayor Tory, I don't know, do you want a last word? You're on mute. You're on mute.
Before I leave and go back to the police board, may I just say, and look, this is not presuming as to what you'll do with the item that's in front of you with respect to transit vehicles, but I just want you to know, I think you all know how committed I am to transit expansion. That's hugely important, but I'm also very committed to getting the kind of support we need to get the transit vehicles we need. I think Rick understands that. We spent lots of time talking about it. I'm busily engaged in discussions with the other governments, as I have been for some time. And I just want you to know that if you approve whatever you approve today, whatever that may be, and I think the recommendations are good, but that's a personal. My life's mission is going to be to get that done. We need those vehicles. We need their support. They've given it in the past. And I just want you to know it's you know, one of many files that I have with them on housing and on transit. But these are things we must move forward with. And so I just appreciate the Commission's positive consideration of that. And I want you to know, once you have dealt with it, I will take the results of that and take it forward with some of you and others to make it happen. So thank you very much for your consideration of that. And thank you for allowing me to come and visit with you today. And thank you for your service.
Thank you, Mayor Toria. We appreciate your support very much. And now let's come back to our meeting, and we'll start with the question of the declaring any conflict of interest. So let's do that first. So in accordance with the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act, does anyone have a conflict to declare? Seeing none, I think we can proceed. And then the next item we have is approval of the minutes. So may I have a mover and a seconder? I see Commissioner McKelvey moving and Commissioner Bradford second. Any comments on the minutes? Any? Okay, seeing none, all in favor, raise your hand. Thank you. Okay, we're good with that. All right. So before we move on, I want to remind you that, as usual, this is an open meeting, and arrangements have been made to facilitate public deputations by telephone on some of our items. I think you've got the final list of speakers. As we go through the agenda today, you'll be required to email requests to ask questions and to speak on items to the email address provided to you by the clerks. If you wish to submit a motion on any item, again, please email your motion to the email address that you've been provided. And hopefully we won't have any technical trouble, but if we do, I think you also have the proper contact information that would allow you to get in touch and sort those problems out. We've got a short agenda, but a powerful agenda today. So I'm going to hold most of the items We're going to get a verbal update from the CEO. So item 1, item 2, we will get a verbal update from our ACAT chair. So we'll hold that. Item 3, we're going in camera. And there are some deputations and staff presentations. Item 4, we're also going in camera. Item 5, we're going to hold for deputations and a staff presentation, and item 7 for deputations. So the only item a question for you is, does anyone wish to hold item 6?
Madam Chair, I just made a couple of questions.
Okay, we'll hold item 6. So that's good. So we will, now we're going to, again, for just because it'll just be make our meeting run more smoothly, we are going to recess as committee of the whole for items 3 and 4. And so I should read that motion. Yes, Chrisanne? So the motion is that the board recess as the committee of the whole to consider information about a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land for municipal or local board purposes and labor relations or employee negotiations related to items 3 and 4. May I have a show of hands showing support for that motion? Thank you. So for the members of the public, we're now going to be moving into a closed session on items 3 and 4 of this agenda, and we will return to a public session and a live broadcast as soon as we're done. So we'll just take a minute to prepare for that, and then we'll begin. Thank you. Okay, we're live again. We're back, and we're going to begin with the Chief Executive Officer's report. So I'm going to invite Rick to address the board. Rick?
Thank you again, Vice Chair. I'd like to welcome our YouTube viewers and today's participants to the board's 5th virtual meeting. And I'd also like to welcome Chair Robinson, who I know is watching out there today. I'd let everybody know I had a number of wonderful conversations this week with her, and a lot of planning going on as we prepare for 2021. I'd like to begin my remarks, though, with the thoughts for the 114 employees who have tested positive for COVID-19 since the outbreak of this terrible pandemic. And thankfully, 95 of them have returned to work, and we wish all those currently self-isolating a full and speedy recovery. I can't stress enough that how important it is that our employees are, and they really are our greatest asset. During each phase of this pandemic, our workforce has been in lockstep with Toronto public health guidelines to ensure that we're delivering a safe system. The safety of our workforce and our customers is at the forefront of everything that we do. I'm grateful for the valuable work of our safety and IT staff, who most recently undertook further protective measures to block the spread of the virus by launching a COVID-19 online screening form. All employees attending the workplace can now complete the form within 2 hours prior to starting their shift. This is to further ensure that employees aren't entering the workplace when they're not feeling well, or they may have come in contact with a positive case. As well, we continue to support in-person screening at our divisions and locations. You know, as we talk about the pandemic, I remind the board that you are aware that last week I announced we would be recalling the remaining furloughed employees on November 1st to help us address some of the current and upcoming pressures our bus network is facing. Since March, we knew that we would need to be flexible in order to adjust and to meet the consistently changing demand. In the last several weeks, we have seen demand on the bus network plateau to what we believe has become the new normal, if normal is what it is, at least in the medium term. Currently, bus boardings are at 50% of pre-pandemic levels, and we no longer see the traditional peak periods. Our ridership is spread more evenly throughout the day. We also know that in November, more students will be returning to class. Other factors that played into this decision to recall the remaining employees include, the need for shuttle buses for the proposed 10-day closure on Line 1 that is before you today, as well as to continue the major capital projects through early access that we're doing at nights and weekends. As well, this will help us manage operator retirements at the end of 2020 while we do continue to undertake our recruitment plans for 2021. The new normal has resulted in us deploying additional service to our busiest routes in order to better manage our capacity. And that approach, I would tell you, is working. More than 90% of our bus trips have fewer than 25 people on each vehicle, and that's about half the capacity of a 40-foot bus. And I tell you, I believe that is good news, but we're always thinking about what we can do to do more. Recalling the remaining employees gets us an additional 110 bus operators who will play a big part in delivering our service in a strategic and a demand-based way. We will also get some subway and streetcar operators retrained so they too can prepare for driving buses. Another piece of our pandemic management strategy is around face coverings. While our audits show that 97% of customers are wearing masks, not all wear them properly. As I've said for months, face coverings are critically important on busy vehicles where physical distancing is not always possible. And that's why we did make it mandatory, as we all recall, on July 2nd. In order to promote proper use, we have amplified our awareness campaign so everyone knows that leaving part of your face exposed is not the right way to wear a mask. And, it's really quite simple, and we all know about it. When it comes to the nose and chin, we're telling people to keep them in. But we also know that access to masks does remain a challenge for some. Through the hard work of TTC staff and the city's poverty reduction office, almost 1 million masks have already been given away. And I tell you that I'm pleased to announce today that Jim Ross, our Chief Operating Officer, has developed a plan to enhance our mask distribution plan. Our revised plan will get masks into the hands of customers on the busiest bus routes at the busiest times. And we're going to do this in a number of ways. First, we will extend our COVID ambassador program in stations where customer traffic is concentrated at major terminals. Second, we'll introduce roaming COVID ambassador teams of 2 who will rotate through the known hotspots on the bus network, again, distributing masks. We'll also intend to distribute masks during the proposed shuttle from December 4th to December 14th on line 1 during the shuttle closure. The extra service we're providing with recalled operators and the additional attention to face coverings are just 2 more ways in which the TT is keeping our system safe for customers and employees during these unprecedented times. As well, with the return of operators on October 4th, we're now operating 96% of pre-pandemic bus service, as well as 86% of pre-pandemic streetcar and subway service. In the CEO report, I want to make you aware that in the CEO report, we do report out on weekly service hours, but on the charts on pages 46 and 56, you'll note that we actually identify a lower percentage than what I just mentioned. And I wanted to let you know that what we do is we compare what the actual service provided compared to what's budgeted. But in this case, we have to make sure that we include the runners directed of the 600 buses that you've heard us talk about in the past. And more recently, we have included that into our vision system, or our CAD-AVL system. So we're going to make those corrections, and you'll see that in the coming month. But with that, you're also going to see in the coming months, we're looking to take the CEO report and the KPIs and rebrand them. We've made great progress operationally in recent years, but what we really want to do is bring this forward and look at the matrix we're presenting and provide you the most important that we have here today in 2020, as well as going forward. Now, last Friday, I was pleased and honored to have the opportunity to join Mayor Tory, Deputy Mayor Minnan-Wong, and Commissioners Carroll, McKelvey, and Bradford to announce that the TTC's fleet procurement strategy and plan that is before you here today. And the mayor stressed at the time the immediate need for us to move forward with the vehicle infrastructure investments outlined in this report. I look forward to the discussions on this item today. We have a really nice presentation for you, and I welcome that this afternoon. Approval of this item will allow the TTC to fast track the priority procurements of 683 new vehicles made possible through the city building fund, with the deliveries beginning next year. Commissioners, earlier this month, we held our first, and just to pause for a moment, take a drink of water if you wouldn't mind. It's going on, isn't it? Commissioners, earlier this month, we held our first ever virtual accessibility forum. Almost 300 people viewed our live stream, and we received a lot of great feedback. I do want to thank the Chief Corporate Affairs Officer, Natalie Pohl-Moffett, for moderating. She did a wonderful job, but I'd also like to thank you, Vice Chair DeLaurentis, as well as ACAT Chair Mazen Aribi for their participation. I know we all enjoyed ourselves, and we had conversations following it. What I would let people know, that those who were not able to participate or view it, the webcast is available on the TTC's website at ttc.ca. As you know, Wheel-Trans really is nearly midway through its 10-year transformation program. Progress is being made in many initiatives, such as scheduling and dispatch systems, booking systems, phone services, a mobile app, and so much more. I am pleased to advise the board today that Wheel-Trans introduced a new self-serve portal on its customer website. This is a new digital tool for existing customers and our new applicants. It provides them with a paperless option to quickly and conveniently start the re-registration process or to submit an application for Wheel-Trans service. While customers can still choose to submit forms through the mail, we believe that this new option will simplify the application and eligibility process, enhance the customer's experience, as well as avoid any mailing delays. Another exciting development that we have going on with Wheel-Trans is the pilot of our new 7-meter paratransit bus. The new ProMaster bus arrived probably on September 15th. It's the first of 90 more that will be delivered by Creative Carriage from the contract that this board approved earlier this year in February. The new Wheel-Trans bus offers more passenger capacity at 7 meters versus compared to the current 6-meter vehicle. Staff are busy prepping the pilot bus, and once ACAT completes its review, it will enter service in November, and then we're going to welcome comments from our customers. Last month, we advised you that we were close to having all 60 of our battery electric buses on the road. Staff have now completed commissioning of 55 e-buses, which are now in service and operating out of 3 bus garages: Arrow Road, Mount Dennis, and Eglinton. The first 10 of each manufacturers, as you recall, are now in a head-to-head competition over the next year. TTC staff, again, will be working closely to evaluate and document a number of different areas regarding these buses, and I'll just mention a few. We're going to be looking at customer satisfaction of the vehicle, employee satisfaction of the vehicle. We're going to assess the overall performance of the vehicle, as well as its charging system, as well as the overall vendors themselves and how they perform working with us going forward. So that's another great thing that's happening. There's so much positive here, Vice Chair. Looking ahead to next month, the TTCs work closely with other government partners to advance projects and plans to expand Toronto's transit network, and staff will bring a report forward in November. The report will provide the commissioners with an update on a number of different areas, and I'll just mention a few. We're going to provide you an update status on each of the expansion projects. We're going to let you know that we're establishing an internal transit expansion assurance structure to effectively manage the transit expansion portfolio. We'll also outline the resource agreement with Metrolinx for supporting the subway projects. And finally, we're looking to provide an operational focus on mobilization efforts regarding the Eglinton Crosstown Line 5, which will open in 2022. This year marks the 75th anniversary of the end of the Second World War. More than 600 TTC workers enlisted for service in World War II. Their names are remembered on our official honor rolls, including a dozen killed in action. As you're probably aware, the TTC has a long and proud tradition of supporting the annual Poppy Drive. Sadly, this year, the global pandemic means our cherished veterans will not be in our subway stations selling poppies. And I got to tell you, this really breaks my heart. I can tell you that Commissioner Heisey and I really enjoyed this event over the last few years. I look at it that we are so privileged to live in this great country, and our veterans are the ones that are one of the reasons for that. So that was really tough. I will let you know that the TTC will continue to honor candidates fallen on Remembrance Day by pausing all service for 2 minutes at 11 a.m. on November 11th to honor those who died in service of our great country. And I would strongly encourage anyone who can visit the Royal Canadian Legion website at www.legion.ca for other ways to show your support for our veterans. With that, Vice Chair, that concludes my opening remarks.
Thank you very much. There certainly is a lot amazing things and exciting things going on. I think we have at least one question, and I see some more hands. But Ron Lalonde, I think you registered. You wanted to ask a question, so let me hand it over to you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. A question for the CEO on electric buses. I noted in the materials that there were some suspension issues noted on the electric buses, which doesn't sound like something that's related necessarily to the propulsion system. And I know it's early days on the e-buses, and we haven't hit the hard part of winter yet. But is there any anecdotal feedback thus far as to how the charging systems are working? Are we running into any kind of unforeseen problems, or how are things working so far?
Through you, Madam Chair, I'll take that, and then I'll ask Case if you'd like to say anything to add to it. So right now we're finding some real significant benefits from the all-electric bus. When we're looking at comparisons to the other two fleets, right now the hybrid electric is the most reliable vehicle that we have. When you look at the KPIs across the board from a reliability standpoint. But I would tell you that we do acknowledge that all three of the vehicles, although we do like these vehicles, right, and we're seeing a lot of positives, They are new to this organization, and each one of them has its own type of challenges, whether it's some structural or corrosion issues. So I'm going to ask Ben Case to give you the specifics, because he's the closest to it when it comes to the electric charging systems. I know that we're getting a little bit more distance of one from the other, but Ben, could you give a little bit more specifics on the charging systems, please?
Each of the bus types have their own issues. For charging systems, we're actually achieving 97% availability, and to date we've had no buses out of service or not able to go to service because the charging system hasn't been working.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. And next up is Councillor McKelvey. You have a question?
Wondering if the CEO could speak to the latest fiscal forecast for the year and how that is looking, and then also on the situation with staff and how many are still off returning, etc.
So thank you for the question, Commissioner. We're monitoring the revenue and ridership numbers, particularly since the modified stage 2 has been announced. What we're seeing is essentially a return to similar trends that we had in the initial stage 2. And so what that's telling us is that our ridership is at roughly about 35%, and our revenue is just tracking about 1% lower than that. And that's what we saw back in July. So where we thought we were just even a few weeks ago, we were closer to the 38% of ridership. So we're reevaluating kind of our projection to year end. We thought we would see an average of about 45%. So we're remodeling that based on what we think is going to be a continued trend to year end. And as well, looking at that in terms of our implications for 2021.
The move back to this kind of modified stage 2 do you ballpark know how much more of a deficit you're expecting, or were those numbers already accounted for?
So the numbers that we had been forecasting when we last met assumed a bit of a tranching up to about 45% of revenue by year end. So if we are seeing a bit of stagnation there, we may end up in about an average of about 40%. Looking over this last quarter. So we're still close. I mean, we'll be looking at this. We think that there may be a slight different adjustment as we get closer to the winter weather, as some people may transfer over onto the transit system. So we're just monitoring closely right now. We're sticking with the forecast, but we're looking at our results for our next meeting. You'll have a revised projection for the board to consider.
Okay, thank you. And then the other question was just about number of staff.
Do you know how many people we still have out? Yeah.
So right. So all the 179 operators will be getting notified this week of their return date. Does that answer your question, Commissioner? I'm just trying to. I hope I didn't miss this.
That's the one. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner or Councillor Carroll, you had a question?
Thank you. Just a couple, Madam Chair. Thank you. The first one is a follow-on from the last conversation. It's about winter preparations. I note that there is a brief description and going through the checklist there. I was heartened to see that, and with all of the efficiencies we're having to do wherever we can. Is that being done with the same robustness as usual throughout the system? Because I understand that the forecast is that this is going to be one of our more snowy winters. So are we really ready on the track such that we won't have to worry, even though we have reduced ridership? We don't want to have reduced functionality. Are we good to go for the winter?
So we 100% agree with you, Commissioner Carroll. We are building as if it's going to be a tough winter, and we are preparing the infrastructure to support the ridership, no matter how small or how large.
Thank you. Thank you. And then I that's my positive question. Now I have one that made the hair stand up on the back of my neck. And that is on page 11, that we might actually find ourselves due to provincial delays having to do another overhaul on SRT vehicles. Please tell me that's a just in case mention and it's really not going to come to that.
I'll take that through you, Madam Chair. We just wanted to make sure we gave you an update that we were going to be coming back next month. We know over the last couple of years, as you're aware, we've had some significant challenges maintaining service on the SRT. More recently, in the last 2 years, proactively shutting it down so that people wouldn't be stuck on the SRT during those 8 or 10 days during the inclement weather in the winter. So we've done the assessment. We're completing the assessment. We actually have discussions that will continue with the city and the province on this as we look at what our options are. You recall that we put a program together that we wanted to continue to operate until 2026, right, when we intended to have the expansion. We were very clear to forecast that would be a very tough challenge. So that's what staff are working on now. Where is the best from a business case perspective to invest money, to make sure we maintain that, or what the options are. So that's what we're looking at now. And I just wanted to give you kind of a look ahead for next month that we'll be coming there, because many of you have asked that question. Where are you coming back? And we said the fall, and so we wanted to make sure you knew where it was.
So refresh my memory, and I know you're coming back next month, but there are so many intergovernmental conversations going on right now. I wonder if you could just refresh my memory. We're now having to run this thing till 2026, largely due to delays and changes in route alignment generated by a new government coming in. And a subway expansion had been adopted, but then they wanted to look at the alignment, costing more time. Is the cost of us having to survive with the SRT until 2026 being borne entirely by the TTC and the city, or
So
is it being
I'll
factored into the provincial project to some extent?
Right, so I'll answer that. When we prepared the report that went to council in October of 19 regarding the upload, we were very clear in our discussions with the province that we would now need to assess the SRT, recognizing, as you know, the Line 2 extension east won't open closer to 2030. Right, so that's why we wanted to make sure we did our assessment, and that's what we're doing. Would we put more money into keeping the system going, or would we make recommendations on alternative service? And that's what staff are doing right now. And we have, to answer the question, and we are going to get back to the province with the city, all right, to identify what the incremental cost is if beyond 2026. So you're absolutely right, and that's the intention to get back to the province on.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? Just show of hands so I can. Commissioner Heisey?
Extremely literal. I was responding to your direction, show of hands. So I don't have a question.
Okay. All right. Well, then we don't have any other questions. So I'm going to move a motion to receive. So show of hands that you all agree with me. Okay. Thank you. All right. We're going to move on then to item 2, and I'm going to call on Chair Mazen Aribi to present the ACAT minutes. And by the way, I want to add my congratulations to those of our CEO. It was just really very thoughtful public session, and Mazen, your contributions were terrific. So I want to add my thanks to those. So over to you.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair De Laurentiis. Good afternoon, everyone. The highlights for today is going to be short. So we had 2 meetings, the July 30th and August 27th meetings. So for July 30th, ACAT and its subcommittee members continued to monitor the impact of COVID-19 on accessible transit. Members received an update on the new Wheel-Trans 7-meter ProMaster bus progress, and we are working with staff very closely to ensure that this is the right vehicle and we are covering all the angles. Members received a presentation on easier access designed for museum station. DRS members raised a few questions and concerns. One particular concern that we would like to raise was the need for ensuring every entrance and exit to stations are accessible. We have expressed concern why the second exit to museum station is not going to be accessible. For the highlights for August 27 was we discussed several items, several issues and items this month, including priority bus lanes, the Wheel-Trans self-booking website, new improvement for access hubs on design, wayfinding, and feature consistency, discussion and review of third-party entrances and elevators to stations, COVID-19 Wave 2 communication campaign. One particular item was top of mind was the easier access phase 4 plan regarding the feasibility of providing a second elevator at key stations to help improve public transit and customer service. As many of you know, ACAT has advocated for providing more than an elevator at subway stations. Finally, ACAT wishes to stress the importance of keeping customers with disabilities and seniors top of mind during these times. Our next ACAT virtual meeting will be next week, Thursday, October 29, via WebEx. And as always, we encourage commissioners and councilors to attend our monthly meeting if they are able to do so. I also like to take a personal note, speak to a personal note, which is on a personal note and on behalf of myself and ACAT, I would like to thank Mr. Heisey for his contribution. All throughout those years that Mr. Heisey was working with ACAT closely, especially during the quarterly meetings, he demonstrated to us a great support for accessibility. He understands the issues very well. And in fact, he was a champion in pushing the elevator and have firsthand experience for the need of the elevators to be always working and multiple entrances and accessible for all. Whether if you're using a mobility device or are pushing a baby stroller, or you're just tired at the end of the day. So thank you, Mr. Heisey, and we, on behalf of ACAT, we wish you all the best. And please keep your eyes on us and on the TTC, and you're not very far. We still can reach you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Ruby. Any questions or comments? Thank you. So I move a motion then to receive the minutes. All in favor, show of hands, please. Thank you. Thank you. So that's passed. So we move on then to item 3, and we have a deputant. Sam, do you want to? Not able? No? Okay, so the deputant is not answering, so we're not able to get him on the line, but we do have, if commissioners wish, we do have, Rick, we do have a presentation, if you wish. Do you want to see a presentation? We can invite Gary Downey to, or we can just move it. So anybody want to see the presentation? I don't see.
Yes, yes.
Yes, okay. So thank you, Commissioner Carroll. So Gary, you're on. Let's have your presentation.
Okay, thank you, Vice Chair. Just as a piece of background, the Bloor Young Capacity Improvement Project is a critical prerequisite to enabling the increased transit capacity and expansion on Line 1 and the overall network. All three orders of government have deemed this a priority project, with commitments to fund the 1.5 billion cost based on the current Class 5 estimate. City Council approved the funding of the municipal share in the 2020 budget process. The provincial government has committed to endorse the project, and the Government of Canada is setting aside 500 million in federal funding through the public transit infrastructure stream. The 500 the City Council has allowed TTC to begin the work while waiting on the balance of the provincial and federal funding partners. Before we take any questions on the report, we have a presentation on the overall project to give you a feel for the size, the complexity, the scope and timescale of the project. Scott Haskell, our Head of Project Development and Planning, will give an overview on the background to the project, the modelling undertaken and the project objectives. Scott will then hand over to Silvano Florendi, who is the Bloor Young Project Director, who will then give you an overview of the scope, where we are on the concept design, current status of the project, overall project schedule and the next step. So I'll pass over to Scott to take you through the presentation.
Gary, and good afternoon, Board and Commissioners. On slide 2 now, if we'll move to that. As Gary said, this is an absolutely crucial project, and it's crucial because Bloor Young Station is the busiest station on our system, and it is by far the busiest rapid transit interchange station in Canada. There is no other confluence of stations in Canada in the rapid transit business that comes close, and in fact it would be ranked very high amongst stations in the rest of North America as well. It's a junction between lines 1 and 2. It's the major of the two junctions between those, and it's used by more than 20,000 customers on a typical pre-pandemic weekday. So it's not only a busy interchange between lines where many of those 200,000 customers transfer between lines. It's at the center of a growing and densifying neighborhood, and so it's as crucial as it could be when it comes to stations. So because the station is that important, it has to continue to function in a satisfactory manner. You can see some pictures here which show the kind of passenger crowding that can occur on the platform and in the circulation spaces in the station. The pictures here were taken during a service disruption, but this kind of crowding does regularly occur under our normal circumstances at very busy times in the peak periods. It's even an issue, a growing issue, at off-peak times. So if this happens, if this crowding happens, if the circulation of passengers in the station breaks down, if the platforms themselves get too crowded, then the ability of the TTC to run effective and safe service on the whole of lines 1 and 2 is seriously jeopardized. It doesn't just affect the ability to run service at this station. These effects can ripple throughout the entire network. If people can't get on and off trains at Bloor Young Station, there could be problems further along the line on line 1, for example, as there's gaps and other crowding at other stations. So we know there's projected ridership changes in the future from transit expansion projects. We know that the development is continuing in the city. We know that people are continuing to move to the city and the population increases. So taking that information, we have identified a very serious and continuing concern about the ability of this station to have enough capacity to serve the number of people that will be using the station. So on to slide 3, please. This project has been underway by the engineering folks for a long time, almost 10 years. There's been work going on about this. And it has been clearly demonstrated and included from the evaluation that has been done that improvements to the capacity and the circulation in the station are required to safely accommodate passenger demands. Now, we know there are some transit expansion projects and other transit projects that will have effects on future ridership demand through the station. The province's Ontario line subway proposal, that would definitely divert some people from this station. The automatic train control, or ATC project that we are in the midst of on line 1, that will allow more frequent train service to be run on line 1, and that in the short term at least will be able to move more people away from the station, but in the longer term will actually generate and deliver more people to the station as we run more frequent service. Most significantly, however, the province's proposed extension of line 1 north from Finch Station to Richmond Hill will significantly increase ridership on Line 1. And even though Bloor-Yonge Station, of course, is a long way from there, these effects will very clearly be shown down at Bloor-Yonge Station as more people travel along the line, alight from and board trains at the station, and transfer between Lines 1 and 2. So therefore, the capacity improvements at Bloor-Yonge Station have to be delivered before any future subway extensions are put into service or any future major changes are made to the network. The work here is carefully and closely coordinated with all these projects. It's tied into the ATC project, and it's designed and scoped and scheduled to be delivered before that provincially driven extension to York Region would occur. We go on to slide 4 then. This is a chart which shows the result of the extensive passenger demand and passenger circulation modeling that has taken place over the last couple of years to help identify what changes are required at Bloor-Yonge Station and why they are needed. And so really what this chart shows is how the station would function in the future from a crowding point of view, with or without the station improvements, and with various transit expansion projects modeled and added to the mix to see how they would affect it. The modeling was done last year, but it's essentially transferable to the Ontario Line project. And so we've listed the Ontario Line in here. There's also mentions of the Relief Line because several different transit expansion ideas were thrown into the modeling hopper when this was done. And it shows in a graphic form how crowded the station would become. A red dot shows unacceptable crowding at both levels in the station, and an orange dot shows unacceptable crowding at one level in the station. And we show the results for the modeling years of 2031, 2041, and 2051. So in the top 5 rows, you see that without any station improvements to Bloor-Yonge Station, without any capacity improvements to that station, even in 2031, which is relatively recent and relatively short-term in long-term planning trends, we would have serious overcrowding issues at that station. And by 2051, no matter what scenario you look at, we would have serious problems throughout the station. So this shows us that with the planned future transit projects, this station will really become unworkable and has to be addressed. The bottom 4 rows show how it would be if the station improvements that you'll hear about later in the presentation are actually carried out. And what this shows that in 2031, even through to 2051, we'll still have an acceptable level of crowding, an acceptable performance of the station when it comes to platform capacity and circulation capacity, even with the expected ridership changes from the new transit projects and also from just general growth, even up to 2051. So this shows that what is being proposed here will address the issues and the problems. If we go on to slide 5. So keeping in mind the importance of the station and then the forecasted passenger demand results, the objective of this project is to increase the capacity of the station to support forecast growth from the planned transit expansion projects, as well as growth from the expected higher density in the area. And so there's a number of conditions that would be addressed to deliver this project objective. Number 1 is to reduce overcrowding on the narrow Line 2 platforms and accesses. That's the lower level of the station. And number 2 is to reduce overcrowding on the Line 1 platform, which suffers from problems because of a poor space for distribution of passengers along the platform. Number 3 is to ensure that overcrowding on both platforms does not hamper the alighting and boarding of passengers to and from trains, which in itself can lead to further crowding and further train service delays, which then propagate all throughout the system. And then number 4, the other condition we're trying to address here is to correct serious deficiencies in the performance of the station platforms when very large crowds form from delays and unplanned perturbances to the service. And those are the pictures that you saw earlier. So those are the 4 conditions that would be addressed by this project objective. That's a background into where we are now. Silvano Florindi will take you through all of the details of this project.
Thank you, Scott. Good afternoon, everyone. So as Scott mentioned, preliminary planning and design started several years ago to develop design options to achieve the project objectives. Each option that was developed was evaluated for feasibility, cost, functionality, and how well it addressed the objectives of the project. Extensive pedestrian flow simulations were completed to test the options for capacity and level of service it would deliver. An option involving construction of a second platform on Line 2 and the expansion of Line 1 northbound and southbound platforms was ultimately recommended. The concept has since been refined and the design advanced to the 10% stage. It includes a new electrical substation to power the expanded station, 5 new fan plants to meet fire ventilation requirements, and new vertical circulation elements, as well as a new entrance to improve passenger circulation at the station. Of course, the improvements will also require modifications to the existing utilities and finishes at the station. Next slide, please. Okay, this slide shows the modifications and expansion at the Line 2 level. The figure on the right shows the extent of the expansion. The pink shaded area represents the existing station area, and the gray area is the expansion. The plan is to add a second platform on Line 2, very similar to the work we completed at Union Station. The new platform will be constructed parallel to the existing platform on the south side of the trains. It will extend from Yonge Street, just north of Bloor, continue east directly below the existing 34-story office tower at 2 Bloor Street East, under the 5-story Hudson Bay podium, and end on Bloor Street east of Yonge, just before the curved track east of the station. Avoiding the curve is critical because it'll minimize the disruption to service and mitigate the extended closure of the station for construction purposes. This new platform will service the eastbound trains, and the existing platform will be reconfigured to service just the westbound trains. Next slide, please. This slide shows the modifications and expansion on Line 1 level. Again, the figure on the right shows the extent of the work. The pink represents the existing station area, and the gray is the expansion. As you can see, the platforms intersect in a T configuration. This layout really drives all the passengers on Line 1 to the north to transfer between the two lines. In addition, the main entrance to the street is also at the north end of Line 1 platforms. And as a result, the station is top-heavy, with all passengers moving to and from the north end. The objective of the proposed concept is to drive down the center of gravity of the station to better distribute passengers along the platforms. To achieve this, we've done 3 things. We've made 3 improvements. A new station access will be provided on the south side of Bloor Street. Both platforms will be shifted 1 car length to the north just by relocating some of the service rooms currently at the north end of the platform. And finally, both platforms will be widened and constructed with new vertical connections to the new Line 2 platform, which is south of the existing platform. This work will significantly improve the distribution of passengers on the platforms. The drawing also shows 3 of the 5 new fire ventilation fans. The 4th one is located on the west side of Yonge Street at Cumberland, and the 5th one is located to the north at Church Street next to our TTC existing substation. For the most part, as you can see, the work is situated below existing structures, which results in a very limited space and restricted access. Given the size and complexity of this project, the need to maintain the station in operation during construction and its location, it is critical that TTC work with the city, the adjacent property owners, and developers who have plans of their own to align the designs and coordinate construction activities. Next slide, please. The preferred concept was advanced to the 10% design stage and circulated to stakeholders in Q1 of this year. Comments were received and addressed, and the design is advancing to the 30% stage, including development of a Class 3 cost estimate and a Level 3 schedule in preparation for Stage Gate 3 approval. A peer review of the design has been undertaken, and discussions with adjacent property owners and developers are ongoing. We are also preparing to commence early works in 2022. Possibly it'll include the relocation of utilities and starting construction of the new electrical substation. Concurrently, we have retained a consultant to undertake a procurement options analysis involving a comprehensive evaluation of potential procurement models, including market sounding, to understand the appetite for the procurement options and learn from the market's experience delivering comparable projects. Once completed, the analysis will recommend a procurement strategy to be successful in the delivery of the project. Next slide, please. The project is currently tracking on schedule. The red dashed line shows where we are today. The design is progressing towards 30% stage by Q1 of next year. to prepare for Stage Gate 3 approval by mid-year next year. Early works are being planned to commence in 2022, and the main construction work is on target to start in 2024, pending the outcome of the procurement options analysis. The primary schedule objective is to complete the improvements to meet service demands. The work will be staged, and completed areas will be systematically opened to the public to maintain operation at all times during construction. Ultimately, the goal is to open the new Line 2 platform and the expanded Line 1 platforms prior to the anticipated completion of Line 1 extension by Metrolinx in 2029. Next slide, please. Finally, we are in the preliminary design and engineering stage of the project, and it is critical, it is key that a viable, effective plan is established to successfully deliver this project. The next steps will establish the project targets, including cost and schedule, and also determine the optimum delivery method for the project. Design of early works and property acquisitions will continue, as well as third-party value engineering exercise, which we anticipate to be completed this year. Most importantly, the development of the baseline design to 30% is ongoing, anticipated to be completed this year, Q1 of next year. It will be followed by the preparation and finalization of the Class 3 cost estimate and a level 3 schedule. And this information will all be used to prepare the business case required to support funding agreements for the commitment made in principle by the other levels of government. These deliverables will all be compiled and completed, reviewed, and ultimately submitted back to this board for Stage Gate 3 approval in Q2 or Q3 of next year. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? I don't have anyone listed here, but are there any questions? I want to give you the opportunity. There's a lot of information that was provided. Councillor McKelvey.
Madam Chair, I just wanted at the high level, I know that the total project cost is 1.5 billion, and I just want to confirm this is one of our PTIF allocations, and I just want to make sure that I know with the provincial Toronto agreement, there was some change in who pays what. So is all the funding still secured from all three levels of government for this, and roughly what is the split?
One.
Through the chair, all three levels of government are committed to put in 500 million to the full 1.5 billion dollar cost of the project. That was part of the preliminary agreement between the city and province agreed to in October of last year as part of the upload discussion, and it's embedded in the agreement.
I know that the province and the federal government, they're having negotiations over their contributions to those four priority projects, in particular the Scarborough Subway, but this is not part of that discussion, so everything is still secure on it.
It is part of the agreement that was made by City Council to endorse the other subway projects for the PTIF2 funding that was allocated to Toronto, included agreement that 500 million of the 4.89 billion to Toronto has to go to Bloor-Young, and that's in the preliminary agreement.
Okay, so are the feds and the province still working out between themselves, or are they agreed on this project?
So both the federal government and the province have announced commitments to this project in principle. The federal government actually came out in advance of the province in August of last year, and then the province of Ontario committed through the preliminary agreement with the city in October of last year.
Okay, so in principle,
put in the match. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so in principle, everybody's agreed, and hopefully it doesn't get pulled into that bigger discussion that's happening. Okay, great. Thank you.
You're next.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Do we have any idea yet as to how serious the disruption would be to operations of the Bloor-Young station during the 5 or 6 year construction period?
Silvano?
Putting together a schedule now. We're developing the schedule to determine how many closures we'll need and how the work could be staged and carried out with minimal impact to the station itself. We expect that there will be some weekend closures during the work, of course, when the major structural configuration is constructed. But we do not have a specific number of days that we will require closures. That's going to be part of the next phase when we're developing the level 3 schedule.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, if I may, because Gary, I would say this is going to be a very, very challenging project, to a higher degree than we had at Union Station, just from some discussions like that, because you and I have had this conversation. There has to be a lot of work at this station and a lot of work behind the scenes in preparation for how it's going to impact service. You saw the crowds in those pictures, and so we really have to know what we're doing when we go into this.
I think to add a bit of context to it, it's very similar to what's happening in Edlington just now, where you're building a station under another station. So it's kind of similar to that sort of disruption you'll see over the period as well.
The obvious observation that I'd make is, to the extent that some of the construction could be deferred to the period after the opening of the relief line, the Ontario line, that would presumably help with reducing the impact of that construction at Bloor Yonge.
Gary, you're on mute.
Oh, sorry. Because we don't have a firm schedule yet for the Ontario line and the details behind it, it's very difficult to make that assessment at this point in time. We are working very closely with Metrolinx on looking at the overall schedules and how we can actually look at how the projects come together and the interdependencies of these. So we've got an interdependency matrix, so we're working with them together to ensure minimum disruption to the city overall.
Understood. Thank you.
Commissioner Carroll?
In the financial summary on page 3 is my first question. And it goes to the recommendation to approve their costs today. To create TO requires up to 1.5 million for upfront costs associated with the facilitation, so on and so forth. So we're adopting 1.5 today. So is 1.5 an upset limit? That's the most we will need to pay them?
Yes, Madam. Yes, through the chair. Yes, that's correct. But also that money will be reimbursed next year when Create TO have that money in their budget as well. It's effectively an interagency loan at this point in time, so they can kick off the process with the developer. And again, we'll recoup that money next year from them.
Oh, okay. I'm glad you added that, because I thought that was just talking about where we take the money from now and where we will later show it on a line, but it's actually a reimbursement.
Yes.
Okay, that's better, because I thought, that's real borrowing from Peter to pay Paul. I also wanted to ask about the recommendation. I don't think I need to go into camera on recommendation number 1, but are the costs for they're called property interests later in the report, so I don't think I'm saying anything out of turn. The costs on recommendation number 1, were they anticipated and are they included in the overall project cost? The full 1.5?
Again, as I said, it's a loan to them at this point in time, because we actually recoup that money back next year. We've got sufficient funding this year to fund that activity, and we'll get the money back next year, the 1.5.
Okay,
so
but I'm talking about recommendation 1 now and the 1.5 billion that this project will cost. In the 1.5 billion, did we anticipate the kinds of things that we now have to do in recommendation number 1, which is a confidential recommendation?
Yes, we have a property budget within the overall project to look at all properties required for the project. This is just the property for the early works, so we can start the early works in 2022. We'll be coming back at a later date with other properties that will be required to be procured as well.
Right. So we can assume that the other orders of government saw that and knew that to do a project of this magnitude, at the sort of center of the universe of Canada, really economically, that these were going to be challenging acquisitions. My question is, we hear the federal government coming in and the province following after in an agreement in principle on the costs, where I'm a little nervous about that, because this is a project that really has to happen, doesn't it, before we can increase the capacity on line 1, which is a priority for both GTA regions and the Premier. This has to happen first, does it not?
Yes, and it's recognised by the province that this project has to be completed before the Young North extension comes into service.
Okay, so then my last question is this. It's great to have their participation in this for 1.5, but which government is responsible for any cost overrun over and above that amount?
Karen, do you want to take this one?
So the federal government contribution is capped. So it is fair to say that if there's a cost overrun, it is a subject of negotiation between the city and the province. Federal government caps their contributions under the PTIF program.
And is that written into our terms, that it shouldn't come as a surprise if we had, and that's if, with the stage gate process, we always hope that we're better at this now, but if there is a cost overrun, is it understood? Is it in the terms of the agreement that we will negotiate that? There's no drop dead end clause that says all cost overruns go to government X.
So it is certainly it's an explicit clause in the federal government's agreement with the province for the PTIF program that the Fed funding is capped. That's explicit. I would have to confirm that there is nothing explicit between the city and province that's in writing. At this point, the preliminary agreement has just made clear that the province would put in the 1/3 matching share to the $1.5 billion.
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Bradford, you had a question?
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Any comments? Councillor Carroll, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to briefly state that the reason I asked that question about cost overruns is it has to be highlighted that this is almost like building a new line in terms of layers of complexity, trying to keep this thing functioning while the work is going on. I don't know that the community has wrapped their heads around it the way they wrap their heads around Union Station, which became sort of a cause célèbre in the new mega city of Toronto. And so people were really focused on it and expected for years to have this construction going on around them while they were trying to move through that station. But this is on the same order of magnitude in my imagination, because I know that as soon as we start to do this work, it's going to be very difficult to move people through that. In an unplanned line down situation, it's really difficult. And so I think it's really important that at the early stages, we make it very clear that we're going to be on top of the project management. I understand I think it's AECOM we're contracting to this, or we contracted them for part of it. That we're going to be on top of that we're going to do our level best to avoid cost overruns. But, here we are in the middle of a pandemic that is costing dollars and cents and awkward conditions around all sorts of capital works. And I think it has to be understood that something this complex, but that is crucial to the vision and the mobility strategy of the province, and because of its impact on mobility throughout Ontario. I think we did an economic growth strategy of the federal government as well. I hope it's understood that we run into kind of difficulties that we're having today, for instance, in the midst of a global pandemic, that cost overruns are going to have to be negotiated, that we are serving not just our own system, but their overall mobility strategies. And so that if at some point they say, well, you managed it, you deal with the overruns, that's not a cost that the city is likely to be able to bear by the time that bill comes due. And so I hope it's understood at the outset, we're doing our level best to avoid cost overrun, but you'll have to come to the table if there are any. Thanks. Those are my questions and comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, good to reflect on those points. And any further comments? If not, then I think we'll move adoption of the report. So let me see a show of hands. Thank you. Thank you. So we'll move now to item 4. I don't have any questions from anyone. We did have opportunity to go in camera here. So is everybody comfortable if we move to a motion to receive, or are there any questions?
Could you just state the name of the item? I'm rushing to get back.
Yes,
to
item
that,
4, it's the state of good repair. It's the delegation to the CEO for the asbestos abatement program.
Thank you. No question.
Okay, so can I move a motion to receive the report? A show of hands? Thank you. Very good. Okay, we'll move to item 5, and we have some deputations. So we'll go to those.
Can you call out the item, please? The title?
Item 5 is the fleet procurement strategy.
Thank you. Great.
Hello.
The first deputant is Charlie Canzano. Go ahead.
Hey, can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hello?
Go ahead.
Oh,
yes,
thank you very much.
We can hear you.
Hey, I've used the TTC as my primary method of transportation for the past decade. It's gotten me relatively reliably to all sorts of jobs, and it's gotten me 2 college diplomas. So thank you good job to all for that. I'd like to bring Bombardier's track record, our relationship with them, under the spotlight for a minute as we're looking to procure further vehicles. Hello? Oh, hello?
Yes, keep going.
Sorry,
we can hear you.
I've got all kinds of beeping on my end. I'm sorry, I'm not used to this.
Okay, we can hear you perfectly well.
Thank you again. So it should be remembered that our 2011 subway cars only are going north and south. Wouldn't it have made sense for Bombardier to design as cars that are suitable for the Line 2 as well as Line 1? At any given time during the day, these cars can be seen idling at Wilson Station. So it makes me wonder if further fleet procurement is even necessary. Even more importantly than that, and this is going back to 2011, these new subway cars were designed with a new ventilation system. This had the unforeseen side effects of blowing a thick layer of soot off the walls of the tunnels into the air for passengers and operators. If another company had been given this job, would they have had the civil engineering foresight to find their way around this? Would we have had the same problem? And while ppm or air quality levels in the tunnels are shown to be within safe limits, please consider that they are higher, or they may very well be higher than they would have been if we had gone with a different company. And additionally, we have in 2017 our Red Rocket drama with Bombardier, and everyone expected these delays in orders being met, but even the most cynical Torontonian could not have anticipated our situation with being stuck negotiating for the warranty to remain intact. That we cannot keep up with the maintenance requirements for these vehicles is not our fault, and it's very unfair that we should be in this position. More importantly even is the quality of these products. A company that specializes in civil engineering should have had greater foresight than to put a payment system in the middle of a moving vehicle and expect people to reach it as kind of an honor system in the middle of the messiest of Toronto winters. Try to imagine everyone climbing over one another to get to the middle of this thing when there's not even any grip tape on the ground. It was really spectacular to see that this is something the city would have invested in or ultimately accepted, and I can't imagine any other company could do worse. I do believe the answer in this situation is to understand that we're just getting through a global pandemic and now may not be the time for future fleet procurement. The offer should be put up for grabs and left that way so that companies can organize themselves within Canada to meet the requirements. Companies that are not Bombardier or their current parent company, Alstom. Other than the seats being very small and hard and uncomfortable, I don't really have any more comments to make.
Thank you. Any questions of the deputant? Seeing none, thanks again. We'll move to our next.
The next deputant is Hayden Poon. Go ahead.
Yes, can you hear me?
We can hear you. Go ahead.
Yeah. Before making that question, I want to make sure, like, how much is that calling from California? How much do I need to pay for it? Can anyone answer that? Or maybe I make an explanation first.
Sorry, we can't. Can you just speak up a little louder? You're very, very low. So could you just speak up a little louder, please? Thank you.
Yes. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Just a little louder. Okay.
Okay. Good morning.
Much better. Thank you.
Good afternoon, members of TDC Board. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I'm Hayden Woon, a member of TDC Riders and student at Ryerson University. I didn't welcome and commute to Ryerson University every day pre-COVID, but now I'm just studying at home. I'm here to make a declaration in regards to item 5, TDC fleet procurement strategy and plan. I'm here to support the recommendation to purchase more streetcar, buses, and subway trains. I urge you to fully fund the vehicles we need to increase service and provide permanent transit operating funding. So before COVID, when I was on campus at Ryerson, I took the TTC every day. Crowding was a significant issue on the TTC, whether it's on buses, streetcars, or subways. Like, for example, the Finch East bus to like the Finch station, then the Council Road you have taken. Thank you again for riding the bus. The Finch bus on Finch are very crowded in rush hours as people were like heading to the subway station, like waiting at a bus stop, like I had to wait for a long time for the buses, or like just suddenly there's free bus coming in and everyone just get on and it's very crowded. And I don't even care if it's an express bus or local bus or not. I just got on because every single bus is stuck in traffic all the way to Finch station. So in my opinion, I think like we definitely need more vehicles, not only on Finch but also on other major routes. We also need like bus lanes and other active route management so that bus comes frequently and reliably to get where people want to go. More buses and streetcar would certainly help relieve overcrowding on their TDC system. But then there's even more important to have ensure reliable service to riders. The TDC need to make sure the buses are deployed at evenly spaced and not having 3 to 4 buses bunching together and then a 30 minutes wait for another bus waiting. That's an inconvenience for riders. And also we do riders on major routes face sailing and crowdings and forced to get on a crowded bus. There's no option for someone to wait for another bus when you don't know when the next bus will come or you could get on the bus. There's no data available for what the next bus is gonna come. Even you check Google Maps, it's not reliable at all. You don't actually know if the bus is crowded or not for the next bus. And in this COVID situation, it is impossible for someone who is trying to get to work or trying to get to school to expect that there will be another bus coming that have space for them to get on. So they are risking the chance of getting COVID and getting on the bus. And also for a subway, I also take a subway to Dundas-Fort University. So the subway is crowded before COVID and has frequent delay. The subway is supposed to be the most reliable transit method since it's supposed to have this right of way for the entire lane. Yeah, every day going to school is there are signal problems, track issues, train traffic, and crowdings, and getting like waiting on the platform, waiting for a couple of trains to pass, and you still cannot even get on because there are just too many people on it. And then there's also a lot of delays, thinking traffic unreliable, sometimes thinking like my trip and going to school late. So that's a really important issue to tackle. And the delay in the subway system is a huge issue that like we have the capacity. We don't have the capacity for our subway system, especially like when trains getting closer to the terminal station. Like the subway trains can literally get stuck in train traffic like a few stops before terminal, so like York Mills going to Finch, and you just sit there for 10 minutes, or a train just slowly crawling through the line. And which of course injure my transport plan because I also need to take the York Region Transit, which is very infrequent in my opinion. And I don't want to run up to the bus terminal or like either miss my bus or wait for an hour just for the next bus. And so having a reliable transit system is very important for users. And so that's why I think like, so for the subway system, we absolutely need the automatic train control signaling system on all of our lines, including line 2. And so I urge you to also, like when purchasing new subway trains, to fund the automatic train control system concurrently so that we can have a state-of-the-art subway system when it's done, and we don't need to do more closure again. So it's important that the TC purchase new subway trains to have more capacity and upgrade the signal system, and also purchase more buses and streetcars to relieve crowdings. And because without all this, like more capacity, it's impossible like to run more reliable service and to make riders have a more pleasant journeys. And yeah, and so that's the mindset relation to like to support like to purchase of buses and streetcars and stuff.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think we have one more deputant.
Madam Speaker, I was hoping to ask a question of the deputant.
You'd like to ask a question of this deputant?
Mr. Poon, yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Mr. Poon, you've pretty much outlined the priorities that are our own wish list. We know that we can't even really proceed with the expansion on line 2 out into Scarborough unless we are able to afford the ATC on that line. We know we need automatic train control to help us improve capacity, and we need these vehicles. I'm not sure if you were aware. The unique nature of this report, though, is that we really are committing today. The mayor spoke to this a bit at the beginning of the meeting, to sort of front end loading this order. We are proceeding with what we can afford, but we still very much need the partnership of the other orders of government to complete these orders and to order as many vehicles as we need to serve the system in the way that you've just described. Have you considered speaking to your local MPP and MP about this as well, so that they understand the importance of partnering with us now?
Yeah. I'm also part of the TTC Riders. So as TTC Rider, we are doing our sorts of like events to like lobby our politicians to fund like our provincial government and federal government to fund transit, to fund these important projects, to purchase more streetcar, subways, and buses, and also like the signaling system.
That's great. And if you're interested to visit the MP in the MPP in my area, Vincent Key, I would be happy to work together with you or with your organization, so that we could really make clear to them, outline that fulfilling this whole vehicle buy is really important in that area, because while there isn't a lot of room to expand on New East, we've got that crowded situation. Maximizing the vehicles, but also making sure that we're maximizing the way we can serve those riders who choose, rather than to ride across the top of the city, to head down to the Eglinton Crosstown, or even to consider taking the Don Mills route all the way down to line 2, means going to the nth degree on all of these vehicle purchases, and then being able to proceed with the automatic train control on line 2 as you've asked. So if I can help in any way to prepare materials to take those to my local MPP, I'm happy to do it. Thanks. Thank you for your deputation.
Yeah, yes, thank you so much. I also want to say that, like, not only is the subway system we need to like have more capacity on, but we also need to focus on the suburban bus route that connect throughout the city. Is like people are not necessarily all going to downtown, so we need to make sure like the system is like fully functional across the city.
Precisely. Thank you so much for your comments.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. So we'll move to our next deputant.
The next deputant is Alan Yule. Go ahead.
Hello there. Hopefully we can sync up our pictures and voice messaging. So the first slide of this presentation, just give me a sec here.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, cool.
Next
slide. I'm pleased to see this report. It is a good start, but as you might expect, I have a few suggestions. Next slide. When you buy your groceries online or otherwise, you may have noticed that there are nutritional fact labels on the boxes. These tell you what key ingredients are in each box. It tells you the percentage of your daily intake of these components. As a city, we are funding the first of these purchases at 100%, and as city politicians, you deserve the credit for this. Right now, we put this blanket label on, or sorry, next slide, we're looking at the back end of a bus. Right now, we put this blanket label on our vehicles. This labeling implies that is an even three-way split when it comes to the buying of our vehicles. Next slide. This is put on our vehicles regardless of how much funding we get from each level of government. Next slide. Each time we approve a purchase of new vehicles, the board is aware of what the funding model is for each purchase. Next slide. We could post on each of the new vehicles a funding fact sheet. This would let people know how much funding is for their bus, subway, or streetcar came from each level of government. And as you see on the picture, it's got a 33, 34, and 33% split across the vehicle. Next slide. When it comes to the breakdown of this report by vehicle mode, I have a few issues. Next slide. According to this report, it would take too long and cost too much to order new streetcars from a different vendor. How do we know? Do we have an RFI? Yes or no? Next slide, please. Did we talk to Metrolinx about using the Alstom vehicle that is currently being built in Brampton? Next slide. We have two different vehicle sizes in the past. We could potentially use the longer Alstom Citadis vehicles on Harbourfront and or Spadina and the smaller Flexi vehicles on the remaining streetcar routes. Next slide. In our rush to get a replacement for streetcars, we didn't spec them properly. Next slide. We have low floor streetcars that are actually high step streetcars. This slows the boarding of seniors and people with knee injuries or mobility issues. Next slide. The step up is comparable to the step on a bus, except buses pull up to curbs and the right front lowers of the bus lowers. Streetcars seldom do one and don't do the other at all. Next slide, please. How does the likely purchase of Bombardier by Alstom affect the longevity of the Flexity model? Next slide. Part of this report's justification in not having a mixed fleet is the incremental cost of training, etc. Next slide. Fact checked, we will have a mixed fleet when line 6 opens. These vehicles are currently being built in Brampton right now. Next slide. As part of this report, we have 1,422 buses that we plan to purchase. Next slide, please. In May of 2016, and from discussion, I left that meeting from discussions with staff and how that meeting went, that we would have stroller zones on our buses starting in the fall of 2018. Next slide, please. I understand timelines involved. After all, I was the nutter who got the warning lights on the open side of the streetcars installed. I was also the crazy one who got the blue seats put on our vehicles. So I do understand the timelines involved in these things. Next slide, please. But since then, staff have retired, board members have been replaced, and in the fall of 2018, buses arrived without any accommodations for strollers. Next slide, please. Without going into details, This is completely doable with current fleet technologies. It will not require the movement of seats. Next slide. This would get more people on the bus more safely. This would get people to their destinations faster, and it would save the TTC money. Next slide, please. Give me a tape measure, a bus, and somebody from bus procurement, and I can prove it. Next slide, please. As part of the report, we're looking at buying 512 7-meter Wheel-Trans buses. These are just a bit smaller than the ones that are currently used on our community bus routes. Next slide, please. You have heard me depute on the importance of right-sizing our fleet. This would increase ridership on community bus routes and make these routes more fiscally viable. Well, next slide, please. While staff have expressed interest in right-sizing our fleet for community bus routes, this is the second bus buying cycle for Wheel-Trans vehicles, and we're still not talking about them. Next slide, please. A full fleet conversion for all community bus routes, including the 14% spare ratio, would only be 1.37% of the total number of Wheel-Trans vehicles in this report. Next slide, please. Why are we not willing to spend less than 1.5% of the number of Wheel-Trans vehicles to right-size our vehicles for these community bus routes? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Yule. Any questions of our deputant? Seeing none, we'll move on. I don't think we have any more deputants, do we, Chris Ann? So we'll move to questions. Any questions from members? Or we're going to do a presentation. Oh, sorry. Before questions, we're going to have a presentation. So to our CEO. Oh, Ben, go ahead, Ben.
Ben, you ready?
Can you hear me? Sorry. Hello? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you. Yeah. Go ahead.
You can?
Ben.
Okay. Good. Sorry about that.
The floor is yours.
Yes, sorry. I'm just having some technical difficulties. Sorry. Thank you, Vice Chair. This presentation outlines the TTC's fleet procurement strategy and plan over the next 10 years. The plan builds upon strategies reported to the board previously, including the TTC's 5-year service plan and 10-year outlook, the 15-year capital investment plan, and January's report on TTC's 10-year key investment priorities. The plan also takes into account the effects of COVID-19 pandemic. Simply put, the plan identifies vehicles required to advance mobility in the City of Toronto over the next 10 years, which is critical to economic prosperity, social vibrancy, and environmental sustainability of the city and region. The presentation includes strategies and plans for the procurement of streetcars, buses, Wheel-Trans, and subway trains. The TTC's 10-year need for new vehicles and related systems is an estimated $6.17 billion, 8% of which is required for new streetcars, 38% for new buses and charging systems, 4% for Wheel-Trans buses and charging systems, and 50% for new subway trains and automatic train control on Line 2. In total, there are 2,074 vehicles required, over 95% of which is needed to maintain the system in a state of good repair. Of this need, the TTC's 2020 to 2029 capital budget and plan includes $2.24 billion, or 43% of the funding requirement. This was made possible almost exclusively through the augmentation of the City Building Fund by the City of Toronto in December of 2019. The City Building Fund, which dedicated sustainable funding for transit, provides the city's share of investments that must be initiated now to ensure state of good repair of the TTC in the coming years. Procurements advanced through approval of this report include 13 of 60 streetcars required, 600 of 1,422 buses, 300 to be procured now with your approval, and 300 in just 6 months from now, and 70 of 512 Wheel-Trans buses. As you'll see in this presentation, the 683 vehicles we can procure with existing funding will ensure the city's highly integrated multimodal system can deliver the required capacity and is kept reliable over the coming 3 to 5 years. However, procurement lead times for subway trains and the remaining 1,280 streetcars, buses, wheel-trans vehicles require additional sources of funding, and this funding is required typically within the next 6 months. This presentation provides a work-back schedule for each mode, and in doing so, it highlights the work already underway to maximize the benefit of existing funding and emphasizes the importance of upcoming decision points, in particular, how much is required and by when. A 60 streetcar procurement increases service capacity to match demand during peak periods and improves service reliability. It maximizes utilization of existing streetcar infrastructure. This investment has particularly high return as it meets the need for customers on streetcars, but also allows for significant increase in capacity for customers using the bus network through the reallocation of 50 buses that currently supplement streetcar service. This is an added value equivalent to approximately $60 million. As for interdependencies, if we are to procure all of the 60 streetcars required, modifications to Hillcrest would be needed at a cost of approximately $100 million. With a delivery rate of 20 streetcars per year starting in 2023, it is expected that all 60 streetcars, if fully funded, would be delivered by 2025. The report outlines 2 procurement options to achieve this need: issue a contract change with Bombardier or go to market. The report recommends a contract change, as a contract change is the only option that will have all 60 streetcars delivered over the next 5 years, whereas any other option, deliveries would likely start in 5 years. Further, the unit pricing from Bombardier for contract change, although still subject to final negotiation, has been reviewed in detail and found reasonable when compared to recent orders of similarly complex vehicles elsewhere. In the absence of full funding, and with your approval today, a contract change is targeted for Q1 of next year. With time for Bombardier to remobilize its production plant, this would provide for deliveries to start in early 2023 and finish in 2024. However, in order to procure the additional 47 streetcars required, we must secure commitment for an additional $360 million for vehicles and $97.5 million for modifications to Hillcrest by Q1 of 2021. Any later than this, the production supply chain would be interrupted and the production run would stop. With the additional funds committed by Q1 2021, however, the production line would continue and all 60 streetcars would be delivered by 2025. Recommendations in front of you today include delegation of authority to the CEO to issue a contract change with Bombardier for supply of up to 13 streetcars based on acceptable agreement satisfactory to the CEO and TTC's general counsel, and negotiation of contract pricing for the initial 13 streetcars and fixed pricing on options for up to 47 streetcars. It also requests the board approve the recommendation to seek additional funding in the amount of $360 million to fully fund the 60 streetcars by Q1 of 2021. For bus procurements, the plan offers the following. It maintains the SOGR, or State of Good Repair. TTC's oldest buses need to be retired starting in 2022. Without the city building fund and without acting now to procure replacement buses, the bus fleet would be reduced in size by close to 15% in 2022 alone. In fact, all 600 buses that current funding affords are replacement buses. Other significant benefits include the advancement of the bus fleet electrification and all of the benefits that come with it, both local and global. The plan leverages bus reallocation from streetcar routes and higher orders of transit such as light rail and bus rapid transit ways for added capacity. Lastly, reallocating buses to increase capacity allows us to maintain the existing fleet size, deferring the 9th garage from the mid-2020s to the mid-2030s. With the funding we have, we can procure approximately 600 of the 1,422 buses needed. This includes approximately 300 hybrid electric buses and 300 all-electric. As our future state is an all-electric fleet, I will start with the e-bus timeline. We have started our head-to-head tests of all 3 bus types, and with winter testing over the coming months, we can complete our e-bus technical specifications, report results back to the TTC board seeking approval to initiate procurement of the next fleet of e-buses in Q2 of next year. While testing will continue, contract award for approximately 300 e-buses is targeted for Q3 of 2021. With a production lead time of approximately a year and a half, the first new e-buses would start arriving in Q2 of 2023 and continue through Q1 of 2025, in step with the bus replacement schedule. Additional funding secured now could be applied to these vehicles and allow for yet more all-electric buses post-2025. However, additional funding must be committed no later than Q3 of 2023, or once again we'll be faced with a major risk to the state of good repair of the bus fleet. To enable this transition to an all-electric bus fleet, charging infrastructure must be delivered ahead of bus procurements, but on a much larger scale than we have achieved so far. Recognizing the strategic and practical value of working so closely with Toronto Hydro, and following the board's direction in February of this year, TTC staff have been working with its utilities, Toronto Hydro and Ontario Power Generation, OPG, to draft roles and responsibilities for delivery, operations, and maintenance of charging infrastructure. With the board's endorsement today, the settled memorandum of understanding and definitive agreements will be presented in Q1 of 2021. This tri-party arrangement ultimately will ensure charging systems are in place as the fleet grows and allow the TTC to focus on its core business, which is to serve its customers. While all of this work is underway on preparing for e-buses to arrive in 2023, we must act now to ensure deliveries of hybrid electric buses in 2022. With your approval, we'll engage the only two manufacturers of hybrid buses through a negotiated RFP and issue award by Q1 of 2021. This will allow for delivery of approximately 300 buses in 2022 through Q1 of 2023. Recommendations in front of you today: to delegate authority to the CEO to award up to 2 contracts for approximately 300 hybrid electric buses, staff to report back to the TTC board in Q2 of 2021 following e-bus winter testing, and to initiate procurement for 300 e-buses. Staff to continue working with Toronto Hydro and Ontario Power Generation on agreements for delivery of e-bus charging infrastructure. To secure additional funding in the amount of $1.17 billion to fully fund 1,422 buses. The commitment is required by Q1 of 2023 at the very latest. Secure $392 million in additional funding for charging systems by Q3 of 2021. For Wheel-Trans procurements, the plan offers the following. 1, again, similar to the conventional bus fleet, it ensures state of good repair. It also matches capacity with demand and continues to green the fleet with retirement of the remaining diesel Wheel-Trans buses and eventual conversion over to zero emissions fleet. Funding is sufficient for 181 buses between 2020 and 2023. But to remind the board, we already have approval for 111, subject to ACAT approval of the pilot bus, which is currently underway. Today, we will enable procurement with your approval of the 70 remaining buses for which we have funding. This also will be conditional on ACAT approval of the pilot bus. Together, this secures on-time replacement of existing buses from 2020 through 2022, and we can purchase 47 of the 67 required in 2023. Recommendations in front of you: delegate authority to the CEO to issue a contract change to Creative Carriage, and this is through Metrolinx's joint procurement initiative, for a supply of 70 Wheel-Trans buses, subject to approval of the pilot bus by ACAT. Staff to work with Toronto Hydro and OPG on its definitive agreements and memorandum of understanding on charging infrastructure for city buses and Wheel-Trans buses. Secure $154 million in additional funding to fully fund 512 buses by Q2 of 2021. Secure $50 million in additional funding for charging systems by Q2 of 2021. The subway train procurement replaces the aging T1 fleet at the end of its design life. It maximizes utilization of infrastructure, specifically ATC on Line 1, matching capacity to demand through to the early 2040s. And, as reported in January, on our key investment priorities, it mitigates station overcrowding that would otherwise pose increased safety risk post-2026. Interdependencies. While the Line 1 and Line 2 capacity enhancement programs detail all subway infrastructure interdependencies, the most direct dependency of these procurements is the renewal of and upgrade to Greenwood Shop and Carhouse and ATC on Line 2. With the funding available, we are able to undertake considerable work involved through the planning phase, preparing for the RFP, which must be issued no later than Q2 of 2021. As mentioned, however, there is insufficient funding available to progress beyond the planning phase, and so $1.61 billion in additional funding is required by Q2 of 2021. With these additional funds, the RFP would be issued and contract award is targeted for Q2 of 2022. This would also allow for contract options to be exercised for expansion trains as long as the decision is made before Q2 of 2027. However, if the funding is not committed by Q2 of next year, all of the $1.26 billion in existing funding currently allocated to new trains and ATC on Line 2 would be reallocated to sustain current asset performance through to 2036 by extending the life of T1 trains and investing in the ongoing static repair of the existing signaling system on Line 2. In 2036, the trains and signaling system would have to be replaced, an escalated cost of approximately $5.25 billion by 2030. Simply put, committing $1.6 billion now avoids having to fund an additional budget pressure of $5.3 billion just 10 years from now. Recommendations: approve expenditure of $3 million to continue advancing the planning phase of the next subway train procurement and secure $1.61 billion in net new funding for 80 trains by Q2 of 2021. In summary, we have a 10-year need for $6.17 billion, of which 43% is funded by the city, providing for 683 of the 2,074 vehicles and their related systems. Of this amount, today we are recommending approval to proceed with procurement of 383 vehicles, including 13 streetcars, 300 buses, and 70 Wheel-Trans buses. Additionally, we are recommending that the board seek additional funding sources in the amount of $3.92 billion by the time specified in this report in order to leverage the city's seminal investment in transit made possible through the City Building Fund. Again, these investments will have significant impact on mobility, meeting customer expectation and demand by maintaining and improving the city's integrated multimodal transit system. It will promote economic prosperity and civil vibrancy of the city and region, and it will significantly advance improvements in local air quality and environmental sustainability for our city and beyond. Thank you, Vice Chair. That concludes the presentation.
Do you want to make any other? Okay, go ahead.
Through you, Vice Chair. Thank you, Bem. That was fabulous. What I'd like to say to the board is that I'd like to remind everybody, it was only 20 months ago that the TTC introduced a long-term planning document that outlined the need of the TTC over the next 10 to 15 years. We called it the Capital Investment Plan. And it was the first time we took a hard look at asset lifecycle replacement needs as well as costs. And if you recall, it was $33.5 billion. That was 20 months ago. 10 months ago, Council approves the increased budget, all right, on the City Building Fund, providing the TTC an additional $4 billion, $4.1 billion, right, to initiate the upgrade on state of good repair and asset lifecycle replacement. And now we're back here today, all right, with the first phase of what we could do with the funding that was provided us regarding the vehicle. So I want to thank staff for the incredible work that they've done in the last 20 months, and Bem and his staff for the work that they've done. Kirsten, with you and all your staff, and the support of Josie Levita helping Bem on this as well. A lot of work went into this, and I'm very proud of the organization for the position it's taken. So thank you, Vice Chair.
Thank you, Rick. And I think we're moving into questions now. And I have one from Councillor McKelvey. Please, you have the floor.
Actually think my question was answered during the presentation, but I guess I'll just confirm it. It looks like the data is coming in Q2 2021 for the e-buses. And I just wanted to confirm, when does the RFP need to go out for the hybrid electric buses? Like, what's the drop dead date on issuance of that RFP?
It will all be in Q1, but we'll bring that report to the board in Q2. And really, we need to be issuing the RFP immediately.
So
thereafter.
It looks like there's flexibility for that to be 300 hybrid electric buses, and you're given that authority. But should that data prove, that electric look really good and there's merit in that, is there flexibility for moving some of those vehicles to electric instead?
There wouldn't be, only because the lead time for the electric is a year and a half. And because we need to retire about 300 buses in 2022 alone,
okay,
we have to use the hybrids for that.
And then what is the life cycle for a hybrid electric versus an electric? Well, I mean, electric, I guess we don't know yet because we haven't taken any to the end of life. But what is end of life for a hybrid electric bus?
All buses, regardless of propulsion type, have a design life of 12 years.
12 years. So you're getting them in 2022 plus 12 years. So we can be on track for like net zero 2040, 2050 even with the hybrid.
Yes. So our commitments are to procure only zero emissions buses by 2025, or starting in 2025, and be zero emissions by 2040. This plan in front of you, although we defer the next procurement by 1 year because we didn't have funding, of course, we will actually be advancing the procurement of zero emissions buses to 2024 if everything goes well in the testing, as you said.
Okay, and then I know that one of the ones, so Rec 5, so looking at the charging infrastructure and getting those agreements in place, how positive is that going? Like, is that look like we'll be able to get these charging stations all up and ready so that we can still meet 2040? Like, how far are you in those discussions?
Those discussions are quite advanced. So we have a draft memorandum of understanding that we're beginning to circulate to Toronto Hydro and OPG. All the CEOs from all three parties have discussed and agreed in principle. So we're working out the memorandum of understanding. We're also working on a definitive agreement with OPG, who will be looking at the co-investment, co-ownership, and operating and maintaining of the assets on our property. So it's all looking very positive so far, and we're on track to report back to you in Q1 of next year with those draft agreements.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah, it does sound very positive. Thank you for all your hard work on this.
Thank you.
Councillor Minnan.
Okay, thank you. Lots of questions. I'm curious why we're going to Toronto Hydro or OPG, and could we go to the private sector, like a private company, to install the hardware and just go to Toronto Hydro for the hookup?
Yeah, so for Toronto Hydro, we have, you're right, we have no choice but to go for Toronto Hydro for the hookup.
No, I didn't say that. I'm just saying, right. Why is it no choice? Why couldn't we go to a different large electrical contractor?
Well, I believe Toronto Hydro does subcontract its work. However, it is only Toronto Hydro that you can go through to connect your, to upgrade your electrical service at your property. That's true for everyone in the City of Toronto, any property in the City of Toronto.
Just a short question on that. Let's say I want to improve the service at my house. I hire an electrician to put in the board. I mean, it's a simplistic arrangement, but I privately go someplace, and then if I have to go to the curb or whatever, then Hydro has to do the hookup. I mean, it just seems to me an analogous situation. Why can't, could we get a better price, or do we have the flexibility to do a similar situation, to have the hookup done potentially by a private company?
Yeah, so I mean, the difference in that situation is that your electrician will increase the capacity at your house to the maximum that's available at the street. If you need to bring 10 megawatts of power to your property, to your house, then you would need Toronto Hydro.
And we couldn't get a private contractor to do that. Well, they'd subcontract to Hydro. We can't directly subcontract and try and save some money.
So that's correct. So we engage in what's called an offer to connect agreement with Toronto Hydro, and they would then conduct the work to upgrade the service to the property line and terminate that at the property line. At that point, there's a substation at the property, and there's a charging infrastructure, electrical, civil work on property, and that's work that OPG would be, if the agreement is approved, that OPG would be managing. But again, there would be a design build contract and operate maintain contracts issued publicly for that work.
Okay, I want to move next to the cost of the streetcars. So back in the day, the original offer when we had an extension was $4 million, and now the price is how many million dollars?
Yeah, so the original price of contract options was in $2009.
Well, how much was it?
And that was $3.6 million.
And now how much is it?
And now it's $6.4 million, not including the cost to remobilize the production line. And if
that's $50 million, $46 million, yeah?
About $46 million, yes.
And so when that's remobilized, whether we get 13 or 50, we have to eat the 46 million, right? Is that correct?
That's correct. But after the 13, you're just paying now the $6.4 million. And that's subject to negotiation still. But the $6.4 million for every car thereafter. You don't pay again for non-recurring at that point.
So I'm curious to know, it's subject to renegotiation. Cannot we create some level of certainty in terms of the price within this existing contract?
Why would
we renegotiate?
The options for the existing contract expired. And so
I understand that, but if we're entering into a new contract and we have to pay the $46 million to tool up, and then sometimes within that process we get the money, shouldn't we agree on what the price would be at certain points in time? And
certainly. Certainly.
Saying it's up in the air.
No, certainly. So the recommendation in front of you includes, I think it's part B of that recommendation, that we would secure pricing not just for the 13 streetcars that we look to procure now, but also for the up to 47 additional streetcars. And so we'd have fixed pricing for all of that.
Right. Okay, so good. And will we get that? Will that come back to the commission before? Like, we're not delegating all of this in terms of deciding on the price in such a large contract, are we?
The delegation would be on the 13 streetcars within the current funding availability of $140 million. And we would have to come back, certainly, and we would want to come back if we had additional funding that would allow us to procure more vehicles than that. So
we're gonna get those details in front of the commission. We're not just, yeah. Okay, so let me ask you, part of that price escalation is exchange, right? That's what the information I received.
That's correct.
So my understanding is this is a Mexican streetcar, not an American streetcar. And so are we paying a difference in American exchange? And if so, that doesn't seem to make sense to me.
The exchange formula for this contract has the exact percentage of the contract that is sourced in the U.S., and you apply the U.S. exchange rate to that. The amount secured from Mexico, you apply the Mexican exchange rate from that. And then the third component is systems secured from Europe, and we apply the exchange rate for that. So it's a detailed formula, but it definitely does take into consideration how much of the vehicle is procured and where.
So on that note, what is that breakout? I've always been curious to know what the breakout is.
So we received the results of the independent Canadian content audit, and I just went through the last version of that 2 weeks ago, in fact. And Bombardier's Canadian content was 51%. In fact, if you remove, I should mention that the requirement is 25%. They achieved 51%. If you remove all of the Mexican content, if you will,
which
it counts to 10%. So you would still have 41% Canadian content.
I'm sorry, you lost me. You said there's 51% Canadian content, which means there's 49% left over, which is part American, part Mexican, and part European.
Oh, sorry. So there's 51% Canadian content. That includes a portion that is considered Canadian content, but is using irreversible manufacturing process that is performed in Thunder Bay. So that means that parts that are produced in Mexico, shipped to Thunder Bay, assembled in Thunder Bay, normally contribute to the Canadian content amount.
Sorry, Pam, you're saying that Mexican manufacturing is included in the Canadian content?
So what I'm saying is that the contract definition includes that, and that would give you the 51%. But if you exclude all of that content from Mexico, then the content is 41%.
Okay, so that's okay. So
you're over your 5 minutes, Councillor. So why don't?
Can we come back, maybe?
Can we come back to you?
Yeah, thanks. Thank you very much, Pam. Thank you for those answers.
Yeah.
Okay. Councillor Carroll, you were questions.
Madam Chair, hi, Ben. The question I want to ask is about the streetcar order. Initially when the announcement went out that this was on the agenda, people asked, why are we purchasing from those folks? Could you go into a little bit of describing why you're confident doing so? There are some issues of getting their line up and running. They were starting to have to wind it down. But with respect to the vehicle themselves, Councillor Minnan-Wong, I think, alluded to it. Initially, when we had production problems and delivery problems, we were told that it was difficulty in the Mexican manufactured parts, and we're now hearing that there is still part of the manufacture happening there. Am I right in the understanding that largely the issues that we have been tweaked, adjusted, and the latter part of this order, you were very happy with what was delivered?
There's kind of two parts to this answer, I guess. One is on the product itself. So the product itself, in the 3 years that I've been involved in this project, has significantly increased, obviously, in terms of the product quality. So all the issues that we had early on and on the first 67 trains, weld issues, significant ones that Bombardier is now addressing through the major repair program, those have been long since resolved. And since then, we believe we have been receiving a quality product. Also, when it comes to the second point is on the vendor performance more broadly. So again, in those 3 years, the last 3 years, the vendor Bombardier has performed well. I mean, they've met all of its schedule commitments except for one car that was 1 month late in the end. They've met all of the conditions that for which we typically have liquidated damages in terms of energy consumption, et cetera. They met the Canadian content requirement. And so if their future performance is kind of predicted based on recent past performance, then I would say, these are all reasons why I feel confident in this recommendation.
Okay, and we now have any tweak that we made or asked them to make, that's not part of the specifications. So we're not ordering a new vehicle so much as ordering additional units of a vehicle we now know well.
That's correct. So
am I right?
Yes, that's right. So the 204th car, the 205th car will be the same as the 204th car, essentially, including all
Okay.
retrofits and upgrades that have been made along the way.
Okay. And going to the whole program, all of the recommendations in this article, there are steps taken to really outline the case, right? And they're right in the recommendations as well. Which pieces are, here's what we're recommending in terms of our expenditures, and here's the intergovernmental piece. And with regards to that, it's difficult for us to know what's been being conveyed to the other orders of government all the way along. In the old days, we had the Ontario Transit Vehicle Purchase Program. I can't remember what the acronym was that we used at the time, but there was this ongoing conversation, such that got to the point where the other orders of government, they knew what our fleet needs were. They were constantly reminded of them. Has there been an ongoing conversation about this? Dating back to, if we go back to a couple of years ago to when we got that big 20-year outlook, did we start then to be very clear these are our vehicle needs, such that what we see in the table today, that we need the other orders of government to take part in our front-end loaded ordering here, none of this is going to come as a surprise to them? Is that the case?
Karen, would you handle this answer, please?
Sure.
No, we got.
I think
we got your question, Councillor, and Karen is going to answer it.
Like on screen.
Yeah, so sorry, through the chair, yeah, there's been ongoing dialogue with
screen was frozen there.
There's been ongoing dialogue with the federal government and the provincial government since last January, when the City Building Fund was announced and the funding was first attributed, the 1/3 share was first attributed to the vehicle programs. So there has been ongoing dialogue, and they have been also made aware of this fleet report as well. The fleet requirements, as such, should be no surprise. It was also outlined in the capital investment plan, which has also been shared since it was first released.
And I couldn't find in the report, but Mr. Leary conveyed to me, if we can get their participation by the deadlines in the report, we need to hear from them on one of the vehicles is 2023, on others it's early 2021. If we get their participation then on the full orders, we also get a price advantage, not only on the order we're able to additionally do because the other orders of government come in, but the ones we're funding and ordering today, we get a price advantage on each unit, including those. Am I understanding that correctly?
Most of the the production quantities will be set in the contracts that are that come out of the approvals from today.
Okay.
So the only one where there's a impact of the type that you're referring to is with the subway trains, except that instead of us getting necessarily better pricing, it simply means that we can do it, because without their funding, we can't do it at all.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you. Those are my questions, Madam Chair. Thanks, Ben.
Thank you. We'll go to round two. Councillor Minnan-Wong, back to you. Oh, I'm sorry. Just before we do that.
Oh, I think Alan. We've forgotten about Alan. He's still there. He hasn't left yet.
He's going to ask a question. So let's go. Alan, go ahead.
I move an extension because it's his last meeting, even before he starts.
I think you're on mute, Alan. Oh, go ahead.
It looks like he's on a headset. That's what the icon is.
Are you, yeah, are you on a? No, we can't hear you, Ellen. Are you on a headset? You're not? Okay, so Councilor Minin, why don't you go, and then we'll.
Okay.
Can you
Sure.
guys fix the audio? Yeah, okay. We'll come back to you, Alan.
Okay. I'm going to go back a little ways because I think this is important. What was the original date that the original streetcars were due? All of them by a certain date. When did we get them? And how many times did they break their promise?
I think there were, I believe, in fact, dozens of schedules that they failed to meet time and time again, to answer your question. It was in the last 3 years, again, that they were able to meet the schedule from that point forward. And so in the last 3 years, they've met their schedule commitments, except for, as I mentioned, one streetcar that was a month late in the end.
At the end, Bev, how long was the original date of delivery to what we actually got? Was it years?
No, the original timeline that I'm aware of, and I welcome input from Roy Park, who's on this call as well, because this extends back long before my involvement. Yeah. Yes. But since I've been involved, the original date had been the end of 2019, and again, that's what they achieved.
But they were delayed on the way in the deliveries delivery schedule, like horribly delayed, right?
So they were significantly delayed in delivery of the first vehicles because it was supposed to come in at a certain rate over this period of time, and so they were significantly delayed earlier on. But they were able to recover and increase their beat rate or their production rate to far above what would have normally been required in order to make up the time and deliver.
And then we had to spend a lot of money overhauling our existing streetcars to make them last longer, right? The ones that were falling apart.
Yes, we did, and that was subject of a negotiation, a settlement agreement that came to the board previously.
And did they pay for all of those things?
We're about 90% through recovering.
They still haven't paid up, eh?
This isn't actually. There's a portion where they pay. There's a portion where they do work for us or provide parts for in kind, essentially. And so it's the in kind part for
I see.
Parts that we would otherwise have to pay for.
All right. Let me ask you, maybe this, I don't know if this is your question or a question for the CEO. The leadership team, the Bombardier leadership team last go around was horrible. They neglected us. They ignored us. I think Alan would probably be one of the members who was around for that. I don't know who else was around. But it was just horrible. They wouldn't return calls. They wouldn't come to TTC meetings. They were non-responsive. They were, really horrible. They had a horrible leadership team. Now, these are now Alstom streetcars. Mr. Leary, have you met with the leadership team of Alstom on this? Because it's a big order.
Through you, Madam Chair. Just to recap, when we worked with Bombardier and they changed the entire management structure in around early 18, I had brought Benoit, the then vice president of Bombardier, to introduce him to the board as we talked about the recovery strategy. About 18 months ago, Mr. Benoit had to step away for personal reasons, and Lisa Anders had come in and made the commitments about the recovery of the reliability of the vehicle as well as the delivery. More recently, I've heard we're all well aware of the discussions publicly regarding Alstom assuming Bombardier. So yes, the answer for you, sir, is yes, I have spoken to both organizations, Alstom as of earlier this week, and their comments to me were they were very excited about the work that's going with Bombardier. They believe they have a talented executive and a talented workforce. And from a business continuity standpoint and assurances to the TTC, they let us know that we will have that relationship with those that are there today as we move forward with this contract, or should the board decide to move forward with this contract. So I've had those conversations, sir, yes.
So, Madam Chair, one of the awkward questions that needs to be asked, because previous performance is an indicator of future performance. What happens when things, they're going to have to retool and start all over again, right? Get their things going. That's what we're paying the $46 million for. And that's going to take some time and it's going to take some effort. And, you assume the best, but you got to plan for the worst. What happens if things go to crap all over again? What happens?
For me, sorry.
For you, Madam Chair, I'll take that, Ben, then you can jump on if you would like to. Because, part of the conversations I've had with Bombardier is to make sure that as we look forward, we're more well in tuned on what the delivery of these vehicles is going to be. When we created the department that BEM heads up, and I believe Jim BEM said that was just 3 years ago in 2018, around that time frame, it was to have more of a partnership or relationship with our vendors as opposed to be more oppositional. Okay, and we wanted to make sure that as we move forward, we report it out in each step or each phase of the contract, as opposed to have more of a hindsight position of why the problems are. So we work closely with them, and that's what the intention will be here. I remind everybody that when you look at manufacturers, they're really integrators. All right, they have a reliance on a lot of sub-suppliers, right, and they bring them together to build the vehicle. And the vehicle that we have today, as a matter of fact, in the CEO commentary, it's doing twice the reliability that we even put in the contract. It's a very reliable vehicle. So I hope that answers your question, Deputy Mayor. We're looking at, and in the report, it mentions there's 2 items that I asked BEM to look at. And the 2 items that we look at in this business when we're looking to negotiate a contract is, 1, what is the upfront money that you give to a contractor, recognizing they have to carry money in loans, all right? And 2 is the liquidated damages. All right. And we all know that when you're looking at these relationships or the partnerships, that's something that a contractor has to take into consideration, recognizing they really work with sub-providers to provide this equipment. So I've asked BEM to, when he's in negotiations, take a real hard look at what the delivery schedule honestly can be when we get the supply chain from the sub-suppliers from Bombardier, but then take a hard look at what can we give them, because I'd really like to maximize the number of vehicles on this procurement. And yet hold them accountable. So those are the 2 or 3 variables that we use, Deputy Mayor, when we do these negotiations. More will come out of it when we sit down to final discussions with BEM in Bombardier. BEM, do you want to add anything to that, or is there anything that I missed?
I think it's as you say. It's a matter of leveraging heavy penalties or getting more vehicles. So it's you can't really have one without the other.
All right, Madam Chair, I'm finished my questions. Can you put me down to speak?
We'll do that. Let's move to
Thank you.
Commissioner Heisey. I think hopefully we've fixed the, okay.
Am I here? Yes, okay.
Go ahead.
So my first question is that we've designed in the past, I've got to turn off my speakers. In the past, we have designed, I understand the T subway cars, the T1s, were not designed to anticipate driverless operation. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And if we were to try to convert them, if and when we got to the ability to do that, which we don't have today, it would be very expensive to convert those subway cars to an autonomous vehicle with new technology?
Yes, that's correct.
So, and I know that various companies are looking at technologies for autonomous vehicles, for cars, and presumably for transit vehicles, buses, etc. Can we build into our procurement process the ability to have designs that anticipate the possibility of a feasible autonomous vehicle operation, so that if in the future they could be converted at less expense?
It's possible. Yeah, it's possible. There are 2 main physical interfaces that need to be considered when going to an AV bus, an autonomous vehicle bus, for example. you need to be able to mechanize essentially the steering and mechanize the brakes. And then a lot of the other stuff comes in the form of controls and software that could be added later, to your point. So I think that is something certainly to explore, and we've in our RFI, and we've done the market sounding. We've engaged the market to understand how mature the technology is. My only concern with having that as a requirement of the next procurement is that there are too few, in fact, vendors who are far enough along, they're likely to bid on that provision. And in fact, it may be that we would not only eliminate competition, but end up with zero compliant bidders. But we could certainly have a strong weighting towards a vendor who could provide that provision.
Madam Chair, if I may,
Sure.
Commissioner Heisey, what I think that we could do, and Ben, again, I'll let you follow up on this. When it comes to looking at the future of a subway train, for instance, I think what you're talking about, looking at autonomous vehicles, when we look at the future of the integration of ATC on line 2, as well as new trains in a combination, those are options that we have the ability to look at. Ben, would you be able to give us anything on that? When you're looking at over the next 6 months on developing this RFP, we're looking at the increased capacity. We're looking to make sure that we have the ability to go through throughput. We're looking at lengths of trains. And autonomous could be something, I think, Ben, that we could take away. So would you just comment on that if you could quickly?
Yeah, sorry. For trains specifically, we fully intend to have the next series of trains ATC capable and equipped. In fact, there does need to be a decision around what vendor of ATC is going to be on line 2. But once that decision is made, we would specify a compatible system for the trains so that when they come, they're ATC ready.
So I guess my question, I'm not suggesting that we would try and get a procurement on a bus or a streetcar that would be able to achieve autonomous operation. And I hope I wasn't misunderstood. I'm suggesting only that the design would anticipate that as a possibility, because I acknowledge that I wouldn't use the technologies that are available now, and they're clearly, we have to have a whole bunch of other people do a whole lot of other things before you even engage in that conversation. I'm thinking about, we buy a streetcar next year, and in 10 or 12 years' time, the technology has advanced tremendously, and we make the kind of mistake that we made on the T1 subway trains when we knew we could move to an automated operation. And SRTs could have been without operators as well, right? That's an automated system.
It is, yes. SRT is an automated system. In fact, for streetcars,
in spite of that, we have operators in it, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So for streetcars, we are looking at, as the report mentions under the new technology and innovation section, we are looking at a system that could be retrofitted to the existing fleet to allow for collision avoidance and some degree of automation. So there is some ability to do that, and it's been proven as these systems are in use in Europe. But they're still early, as you say, and we need to continue evaluating them and conduct a trial and do our due diligence around that. So, but certainly for any new procurement, we could look to adopt as much of the technology as we can to allow for that future provision again.
So would this hurt the procurement process if I were to move a motion to say that the design facilitate, either accommodate or anticipate possible conversion to autonomous operation?
No, that would be fine. As long as it's not an absolute requirement, like a requisite of the procurement, then that's something that we could build into the
So what would I call if it wasn't called a requirement?
You could refer to the weighting of that as a criteria in the procurement.
Okay. I will try and work something out with the secretary to the board. And tell me what the wording would be again. Include in the weighting?
So include in the weighting of evaluation the adoption of autonomous vehicle technology in future vehicle procurements.
If I may, through Madam Chair, Ben, would it be all right to use the word, assess the viability of being autonomous? Would that be a better word that would give you the opportunity to look at the opportunities for this?
Right. So maybe revised would be assess the viability and where appropriate include in the weighting of future procurements.
If someone could draft that for me, I just want to make sure that it's something we think about. I certainly don't want to cut out suppliers on a technology that's not mature, but if someone's got some ideas that other people don't that would make certain options more viable in the future, I would think that would be a factor you'd want to consider. Can someone help me draft that?
Yeah, we've got somebody who's gonna help you with that, Alan. So.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I don't have any further questions, so we're going to move to speakers, and Councillor Min Wong, you're up first.
Sure.
Sorry, hang on a second. Councillor Bradford, was that a question or to speak?
To speak after. Thanks.
Okay. So Councillor Min Wong, go ahead.
I've got a motion, so I present my motion first.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Okay. Let's go to motions. Motions are first then. So you go ahead with your motion.
That the design of subway cars gives consideration to maximum occupancy for passengers. That's one. The second one is recognizing previous issues with the base orders of streetcars and the poor record of the streetcars being delivered on time. The CEO be requested to negotiate strong contractual penalties and terms to ensure on-time delivery to avoid unacceptable and irresponsible delays, and such penalties and terms required to ensure on-time delivery be presented to the board for final approval, and such terms to be made public to reassure the public of Bombardier and the TTC board's commitment to on-time delivery. The first motion, Madam Chair, if I'll speak to that, is I've been around long enough. A previous chair made sure that we didn't maximize the number of people we could put in streetcars, or pardon me, in the subway cars. And given the capacity problems we have, I think we have to look at a design that maximizes the occupancy. So I think that's really important. The second piece, speaks to something that I asked questions about. I'm reluctant to support going with Bombardier again, fundamentally because based on their historical activities and quite frankly their reputation, they don't deliver on time. And the last time they did this, there was a lot of frustration. We had a lot of questions. They refused to appear in front of the board. So I think we have to actually look at the liquidated damages and the penalties that are involved. I'm supportive of this to the extent that the CEO and his staff are recommending this, and they're putting their stamp of approval on it. So they're going to take responsibility for their recommendations, and they're going to have to answer for this if it doesn't really work out. We're kind of jammed on this. My preference would be to go to the market, but obviously we've been told that they can't other companies can't deliver on time, and we need those streetcars on time. So based on that, I'm going to support it. As I say, their history with the City of Toronto in terms of delivery is less than exemplary. Their history with delivery, the old Bombardier company, is not outstanding. I'm hoping the new company, Alstom, will be able to deliver these streetcars on time, and we'll be able to get what we need when they promise it. And that's all we're looking for, I think, is a good streetcar delivered on time. This is nothing against the assembly workers in Thunder Bay, but the fundamental reality is our obligations are to the transit riding public and the taxpayers of the City of Toronto, and we have to make sure that we get what we need. And in this circumstance, I will support the recommendations as they're presented. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we have another speaker, Commissioner Heisey. Are you on you're on the phone, Commissioner Heisey? Okay, we're going to jump to Commissioner Bradford and we'll come back to you. Mr. Bradford, go ahead. Councillor Bradford.
Yep, thanks, Madam Chair. And, I'd start by saying I'm happy to support the Deputy Mayor's motion. I think that he makes a lot of good points, and his historical experience with what has gone on here at the TTC and our relationship with this vendor is well noted. And making sure that we have these contractual pieces in place and that they're public, I think, is helpful. I think it ensures accountability from the vendor and from the TTC to our customers. So I will be supporting those motions, and I'm grateful for them. When I read this report and in the conversations and the questions that we've had today, I think it's very clear that the TTC has put together a very comprehensive plan. We have key junctures and the financial components that correspond with those junctures. It is all laid out in front of us. And as the TTC and the City of Toronto, we are leading with key capital investments. Regardless of what happens with the other levels of government, we will be moving forward and procuring those 300 new hybrid buses, the 300 new electric buses, and the 13 additional streetcars. And that's frankly not a small feat. With the limited revenue tools that we have here as a municipality, that is not a small feat. So, I'm very grateful for the TTC and staff's work on this and putting it in front of us here. There's also a bunch of other positive aspects of this report which warrant highlighting, advancing ATC and bringing that technology to line 2, the new subway procurement, the new wheel-trans vehicles. These are all things that are going to make a big difference in the customer experience on transit here in Toronto. The latest figures also highlight the underlying trend and challenge that has plagued this system for decades and decades. We see that, as folks come to the TTC, this continues to be one of the most heavily utilized transit systems in North America. And we continue to experience growth, COVID-19 aside, we continue to experience growth despite a historic lack of investment and a lack of state of good repair. And so, with the pandemic pushing us further in terms of financial solvency, in terms of our capacity to deliver, we are going to need a new agreement and a new arrangement for sustainable transit funding in the future. Transit procurement takes time. Clearly, that's been laid out for us today. But vehicles are just as important as transit expansion. And that is a point worth stating. It's great to talk about all the new lines that we desperately need. Of course, we desperately need those. But if you don't have the vehicles in place, you cannot deliver on the service requirements and our service levels that we have described and articulated and presented to our customers. So this is a really important move for us to make here at the TTC Commission, and as it moves on to Council, it's a critical investment. Toronto is the economic engine of this entire country, and we need the provincial and federal governments to step up and match our contributions to build this system. So that's it from me, Madam Chair. Appreciate everyone's work on this and looking forward to supporting the motion.
Thank you. And we're back to Commissioner Heisey.
Am I there?
We can hear you. Go ahead.
The motion that was just sent to me. That's it. I'm fine with that.
Okay, good. And I think you spoke eloquently to it, and it's always good to be, let's be anticipatory to the extent that we can be, so that we minimize expenses in the long run and we're better prepared. So thank you for that. And we've got Commissioner Carroll. Councillor Carroll, you wanted to speak as well? So please go ahead.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you. Yes.
I will admit to a little bit of nervousness when Councillor Minun Wong said he was moving a motion based on his questions, but I think I can support it. Because he's been very careful in his was not tied to staff paying We want them to drive and we want them to cover off on such things as challenges within the delivery of the contract. We want them to protect us in whatever way possible, and so to ask for strong negotiation is not unreasonable. In terms of disclosing it to the public, I'm sure that if legally they can without jeopardizing any business case, they will. Certainly, that's once a deal is ready to fully award, we generally do that, and so I can support that motion. I also wanted to speak because I really want to thank staff, because they have tried very hard to make sure that this program was fully signed off on and fully committed, check in hand through with the other orders of government for a long time, but that hasn't been possible. And it's another one of those cases where I think part of that is the uncertain nature, the times we're living in. But we're only here today, I think, for the very reason that our CEO, Mr. Leary, highlighted, and that is that for the first time, when we got that long-range system needs assessment at the beginning of this term of office, we were looking at the first time at a picture of what we need in the way of fleet that was the first really realistic thing I've ever seen in all my days on council, let alone on the TTC, the kind of thing we have wanted to know about at the city budget process level for years and years, which is to really be honest about what we need for the fleet of the base system before we talk in fanciful ways about any new lines or any extensions of lines. This is what we need just for the system you're riding now to be sustainable into the next 20 years, was really the first detailed snapshot we got. It went on to be honest when we talk about the cost of the new lines that we all are imagining, that there's a vehicle cost and a vehicle order to be placed for those as well. It's not just a cost of how much does it cost to build a station and how many millions of dollars per feet of track between stations. It's so often left unsaid that there's a vehicle cost and a vehicle timeline all on its own, because they're expensive, they take a long time to produce, and at the end of the day, they are a major industry in North America, the way transit and populations are growing, and they are an employer. So placing this order right now is really one of the biggest things that's in all the conversation that's going to happen this month about recovery and rebuild out of this pandemic. We just made the biggest move, because at the end of the day, there's all the cautionary pieces, but we are today committing to long-term employment in an economy that desperately needs it. And so putting our cards on the table and saying to the government, you want your economy to recover? Put this line back to work. We need these vehicles. We told you 20 months ago, before anybody ever heard of COVID-19, we need these vehicles. And now you have a way to help us recover, help Thunder Bay recover, and all of the other ancillary businesses and players that come into play here. We just put them back to work. And so while we're taking a big leap, front-end loading and proceeding with this order, we're doing it on behalf of a lot more than just our own selves and our own riders. And we really should thank our staff profusely for taking that big move. And we should tout it as one of the most important things when next week we're sitting in council talking about when the numbers finally go down, how do we recover and rebuild the economy of Canada? Those are my comments.
Thank you, Councillor, and thank you all. Good comments, good motions. So let's go to the motions, And I too am very comfortable supporting both Councillors Min and Wong and Commissioner Heisey's motions. These are prudent. They, it's demonstrating to our suppliers that we're paying attention, and we plan to manage this procurement in a very effective way. So let's begin with the first. So I think we call all in favor, or yeah. So Councillor Min and Wong, you've moved it. So all in favor, may I see a show of hands? Great. I think that was unanimous. Very good. Let's put the second motion up.
Madam Chair, as this is likely Commissioner Heisey's last vote, I'd like it to be unanimous, so I'm going to call for recorded.
Okay. Very good. Very good. So let's have a recorded vote then. Chris Ann, you're going to take us through that. Okay.
Commissioner Bradford? Commissioner Carroll? In favor?
I see her hand, yeah.
Commissioner De Laurentiis, or Vice Chair?
Aye.
Commissioner Heisey? In favor? Commissioner Lalonde?
In favor.
Thank you. Commissioner McKelvey?
In favor.
Thank you. Commissioner Min and Wong?
In favor?
Commissioner Osborne?
In favor.
Thank you. The motion carries unanimously.
Yay. Okay, is there a certificate that we sent, so that Commissioner Heisey can hang it on his wall and just, we'll make one up for you. That's, I like that. Okay, very good. Excellent. So let's move on to item 6. We have to, okay, so do you want to do that? So we need okay, right, okay, so we need a motion. So I will move the motion as amended. All in favor, show of hands. Very good, okay, passed, thank you. So now we can move to item 6, and did we have, Commissioner Carroll, you had held this. So do you have a comment you wanted to make or a question you wanted to ask?
Sorry, yes. Is this on the
This is the
project management?
The support project services, yes.
Yes. I wanted to ask a couple of questions of staff. I can proceed?
Yes, please, go ahead.
Oh, okay. I wanted to ask about this, and it's in the context of when we've had similar, when we've had large projects like the ones that we have coming up. We have even our state of good repair projects are really quite large in terms of magnitude. And so that's why we're seeing what we see before us today. This is a pretty substantial contract for these services so that they can proceed and manage bundled projects. But I worry about one thing. I worry about the fact that when we employ consultants to this degree, it's sometimes a criticism of using contract project management that over time you start to erode the expertise you have in-house to manage the managers, if you will. That over time you start to lose the ability to see whether or not they still have control of the project, or whether or not your contracted project management services are losing control. And we've had some big projects where that's what happened. And so I wanted to know if staff could speak to that. If we set forth with AECOM and Comtech to do all of this work for us, are we really confident of our in-house shop to keep track of them?
Okay, through the chair, I'll take this question. When you talk about building capability, that's one of the things that we're trying to do, Councillor. We're actually trying to build capability by recruiting people for the key positions. These projects, and again, it's an upset limit. It's not saying we're going to spend this amount of money. It's an upset limit is so that we can actually balance the difference between the cyclic nature of major capital projects. Normally in any business, if you look at your capital projects, it's very cyclic. It's like a sine wave at a point. And normally most prudent businesses will actually hire staff to about 10% below the bottom of the sine wave, because that allows for projects if they're cancelled and anything else. And therefore then you use the consultancy to balance that. It's only for short term, it's not for long term. We're not going to have consultants coming in and spending the full duration on, say, a 10-year project. It makes more sense then to bring your own capability in at that point in time, train them up, because we want to retain capability within the company. This is to take the peaks effectively of the work is to cover this. And again, we've said it's a 3-year contract, but we've actually put an option if we don't spend this money to extend it to a 4th year as well, not to increase the value, but if we don't spend that money, so we have that option as well. But first and foremost, it's about building capability for the business. And that's our first thought in anything that we do, is building capability for the future.
Right, and I noticed that piece that we can actually carry it over if we don't use it, and you'd come back to us if that's the case. So in that piece, in terms of keeping the capacity inside, so while we still have the capacity in house, we will contract this level of project management, but our own team continues to take the art professional development, so they're keeping pace with our contracted managers?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I say, it's about developing our people as we go forward. And again, it's one of the things we're looking at is instigating is what we call functional management for disciplines within the company. So we have a head of profession, effectively, like project management. So they look after the development, and then they have, as you achieve certain levels within the organisations, your competency level has to go up. So we've got to make sure that the people are there and the training's in place to allow them to make that step. And it's one of the things that I'm a big advocate from, coming from the background I had in the past, is always about training people. Because I remember when I was a young project manager, I was given that skill set by people investing in me. And again, that's what the business needs to do and wants to do going forward.
Okay.
You're welcome.
Thanks so much, Gary.
Thank you. Commissioner Lalonde, do you have a question?
Yes, please. 2 questions for Gary. First is, who are the incumbent providers of this service? Are they the same ones that we're recommending for the contract going forward?
No, sorry, I'll just take that question first. No, there's only one of the incumbent. AECOM's incumbent, and it was Parsons and Hatch is also the incumbent one. So we have, maybe I'm going to second guess your second question, but we're looking at a transition between Hatch and the new contract going forward. So there'll be a transition period still to be specified, and how we have that proper handover to happen.
Okay, thank you. That was one of my follow-ups. The other question I had was, how do you evaluate the financial component? Is it, dollars per hour or markup to professional staff, or how do you evaluate that?
It's effectively the rate supplied by the consultants against each discipline. They give us a rate per discipline, and we look at that and do that over the period. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm supportive.
Thank you. I see no further questions. Anyone want to speak? I don't see any hands. So I think I'll move a motion then to accept or to adopt the report recommendation. All in favor, may I see show of hands? Thank you. Okay, we'll move to item 7, and we do have a deputant. So we'll start with the deputant, Chris-Anne.
The deputant on this item is Alan Ewell. Go ahead.
Hopefully the screens are up. There's unfortunately a little bit of a lag between the YouTube and the speaking. Next screen. When I read this report, we currently have a 3.5 foot football field size heat sink in the middle of the Hillcrest complex. It doesn't look like this is going to be a green roof. The McNichol Bus Garage opened this year. It has a green roof. Next slide. It also has solar panels on the roof. Next slide. The Leslie Barnes opened with a green roof. Both of these locations were new builds. Next slide. The Victoria Park Station was remodeled and it got a green roof. Next slide. When they did Eglinton West's roof, they did get a green roof. The Eglinton West part of the now soon to be Cedarville Station is still the same as it was before the roof. Next slide. Is this going to be a green roof or not? And if not, why not? Next slide. As part of the objective of the city's green standard is to improve air quality and reduce the urban heat island effect. Next slide. The TTC is a semi-self-governing agency of the City of Toronto. Next slide. This building represents about a third of the total roofing of the Hillcrest complex. Making this roof a green roof would require some structural reinforcement. Next slide. Even accounting for HVAC, mechanicals, and solar panels taking up a half football field of the roof, that still leaves 3 football fields worth of green roof in the City of Toronto. Next slide. There are enough people on this call that I don't have to explain what 3 football fields of building would result in building cooling, rainfall mitigation, heat island reduction, and would help us get to our total green standard goals. Next slide. The TTC is one of the city's biggest landowners, and simply replacing like for like will not help us meet our Toronto green standard goals. Next slide. So again, I ask, is it going to be a green roof or not? And if not, why not? Sorry, that should say not. And by the way, it's 372 days until our next election. And if I may, Madam Chair, I'd like to thank Commissioner Heisey for his service. I'm sorry to see him go, but it does explain the email I got from the City Clerk yesterday. I would also like to remind the City Commissioner of the wonderful deputational opportunities at the TTC, but perhaps only one deputation per meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. We have some questions. Do we have any questions of the deputant? Seeing none, we do have some questions of the staff. And first up is Commissioner Osborne.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. I actually am glad I'm first because what I have to ask actually carries on from what our deputant, Mr. Ewell, has just put forward. My question is most specifically revolving around solar, because this is a massive footprint, roof print, and I also thought about the green roof thing too, and I just don't know if those things were considered, both for the footprint we're leaving on this earth, as well as our needs. When you look at electrical hydro consumption, would seem to me to be ideal to have a solar farm, although frankly, I know absolutely nothing about it. So hence the question. And I'm just wondering if we looked into the possibility of leveraging this massive amount of south-facing space for other purposes.
I'll take this question. Again, we don't believe it was feasible because of the structural work that would have to be doing to take the increased loads on the shop roof. That would be a major undertaking on this project, and that would delay the replacement of the roof by quite considerable time, because you'd have to actually go ahead and actually do the structural repairs before you actually done that. So we didn't think it was feasible in this case to do that.
Through the chair, maybe I could just add, sorry, it's Ben Case here. Through the eBus program, working very closely with Gary's team and Toronto Hydro and OPG, where we need to reinforce the roof to mount rooftop pantographs for indoor charging, we are looking for the opportunities to include in the scope of that work solar on the roofs as well, because we're already there doing the reinforcement. So there may be opportunities there to enforce it sufficiently to carry the solar systems as well.
Okay, thank you. I have to say, I mean, this is a comment, I suppose, following my question, but I'm slightly disappointed in that, but I understand that there are costs. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McKelvey, you had a question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had the same questions as Councillor Osborne, as well as one additional one. I just want to make sure I understand. This looks like it's a $164 million fund for roofing rehabilitation that goes until 2029. If this is now awarded, it looks like then that brings us up to 160 million of the fund that's been awarded, which leaves 4 million until 2029. So is that a problem, or is that it for roofing and all bases are covered?
Again, through the chair, what we always look at, remember, not all roofs are of this size and this scale. You know, we do a lot of smaller roofs as we go on. This is one of the largest ones within the TTC Commission. As we go forward, we have the study, and in future, if we require additional monies, then it would have to be taken through what we call the project intake register, and that would be evaluated as a priority and funding allocated to that. But that's a business decision as we go forward. Each roof is treated, like I say, we've got a programme. If we decide, if money is coming to an end at that point, then we have to put a business case together to get more money through the budget process and look at how we can either get that additional funding through the city or savings on existing projects to do that.
Yep.
Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, I will then move that we adopt the motion, the staff recommendation as noted in the report. All in favor? Great. Thank you. My gosh, this is brings us to the end of the meeting. This has got to be the fastest meeting we've ever had. So congratulations to
rather a nice long one.
maybe, yeah. Well, we'll have to invite him back then if he hasn't had enough. So let's just a couple of closing comments, if you'll indulge me. First of all, greetings to Chair Robinson. I'm really looking forward to having you back. Believe me, this is a lot harder than it looks. So hope you're doing well and hope to see you soon. Alan, again, thank you so much for your service. You know how much you're appreciated just by all the comments you've heard. And so we look forward to seeing you soon. As soon as COVID allows, perhaps we can arrange a beer that we can all, or a glass of wine. So I'm going to make a note of that, and hopefully it'll happen sooner rather than later. Thank you as well to all the staff. The great reports today, and I think in particular the procurement one that is very exciting, and many of our board members made the point that it really is, it goes to the great planning and the great foresight that you've brought to us, Rick, and staff, and so I think we're advancing the build and the maintenance of the transit infrastructure in a really significant way. So I think congratulations are in order to all of you, and thank yous as well. And as well, I'd say to our front line, our bus drivers, our streetcar drivers, our subway staff, just all of them. They really are. They're keeping the city going. And I took the subway up this morning or this afternoon to this meeting, and I was glad to see that actually there was more people riding today than the last time I took it a few days ago. So I think people are coming back, and I think the message that transit is pretty safe. There are lots of commentaries out there, but the fact is that transit is pretty safe. So we encourage our fellow Torontonians to get out there. Just wear your mask. I mean, I think we all know now that masks are absolutely critical. So wear your masks. And with that, I'll move a motion to adjourn to our next meeting. All in favor? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam
Bye,
Chair.
Alan. We'll miss you.
Thanks, Madam Chair. All the best, Tom.